believe it's 10:43 a.m. There's a listing of the agenda also on board docs. That's the public notice one. So, but we're going to attempt to be a bit more casual, just utilizing the agenda that's here. So if there's no objections to that, since it's Saturday morning retreat style, we'll go with a less formal version of the agenda here. So, but I did want to note that what's agendized in board docs is a little bit about the same, but just a more formal structure. And we're going to go with the softer agenda that was sent to us yesterday morning. So, so with that, welcome and thank you all for joining us. We are scheduled to be here from 9 to noon. As presented on the agenda, the hope is to have quite a bit of dialogue in this day that marks our mid-year, essentially. It's been challenging and a year full of adjustments and new things, and open and sort of close back up a little bit and reopen. And now we're in this phase of getting to our fall semester and fall enrollment spaces. So that's really important, and I think it's a good opportunity for us to check in. All of you know Noah Brown, who's the CEO president of ACCT. He'll be our facilitator today. He'll be kicking us off with a post-pandemic outlook. We'll have a little bit to talk about. We're also embarking upon accreditation in the large cycle for us in the upcoming year. And so part of these dialogues are connected intimately with some of the points of board governance inside of accreditation. And so we're paying a special mind to that here as well. I did want to get a sense, and it's part of the attached documents that were sent yesterday, as well as the college presidents' reports from each of their schools. There is a status, complete, in progress, and sort of the deeper dive dialogues about our board goals that we established last winter. That's going to continue. That's all part of this document. We're going to do our general review of those things, and we've put 3 things as our focused dialogue conversation points about. And I thought with our chancellor here that these are the things that, and I'm learning to adjust my language. We used to say this was like back to basics or meat and potato kind of stuff, but I got a vegan in the household now, so we kind of say that this is the carrots and broccoli side of the agenda, or whatever we're going with it. But it's going to be a deeper dive into conversations about enrollment, about the back to in-person conversation, how it relates to enrollment, and how it relates to what we're doing with our campus plans. Learning loss. I think we've had a large dialogue about the students and the learning loss that's occurred at the K through 12 level, the learning loss that's occurred with us. Conversations that I think we've seen with faculty in our Senate regarding state policies like 705 and how we're implementing and how that's working. And that's a critical and important dialogue that's taking place now. And there's been some really powerful exchanges and really positive conversations about where to go. And then certainly the last piece that we listed here, but like I said, these are focused conversations, not the only things to talk about. Certainly all the board agenda goals that are listed can take some questions and some dives into, but again, these are the focused, attempt to focus conversations into areas based on the time that we have allocated. And the last piece being essentially our human capital. We've entered into a second supplemental retirement effort. We've had a number of retirees over the years of doing these retirement programs, and certainly the new way of doing business at the community college has sort of begged the question about what's remote, what continues, what evolves, what changes, what goes back, what needs to go back to as much as possible in person as we can, and how that all works. And how we're looking at our staff of the future, and certainly understanding what the supplemental retirement is meant and the positions that are open and available and that need to be considered covering and prioritized. So that'll be, again, the third focus conversation with a big bulk of the dialogue taking place about item 1 on enrollments and certainly learning loss there. So with that, we'll try to squeeze in a break into that mix. May not exactly be at 10:30, but happy to take also notes and comments for when people have the need for a bio break or just to get up and stretch around. We're happy to modify that. But with that, let me pass it over to the Chancellor for a quick comment, and then we'll get on to Noah.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vettis. Good morning, everybody. Happy Saturday to each one of you. Thank you for joining us this morning. I'm really excited about today and the dialogue that will ensue, perfectly framed by Mr. Vettis as to a morning of engagement to
Sorry, Chancellor, there's some audio feedback coming from, so I'm trying it one more time. Looks like the microphone is out.
Chancellor, we may have you log back in and out. Okay. Got it. Okay. Sounds good. So colleagues, just for official business sake, I'm just going to note for the record that trustees Moreno, Henderson, Hoffman, Fong, Buelna are all present. I do not see Trustee Vela, but he was sent a note just a few minutes ago to join us, but I will note that establishes our quorum, and that is the attendance here today. We don't have any specific items for a technical vote, but we can provide a vote in direction and for guidance there. So I'll just note that for the record. But as I said, we're going by the softer agenda, which is all officially listed on the other side of it. But I don't see our council here, but for the sake and purposes of noting this as an official meeting that we've come together, we do follow the Brown Act, et cetera. One thing, and as Francisco gets reset, let me actually offer a brief opportunity for public comments to the board. So I know it's a small group here with 28, but if some of you are already going to be on the agenda somewhere, but I wanted to offer the opportunity for any other member of the audience to be able to provide a public comment to the board. If you can raise your virtual hand, and I'll go ahead and call on you there. And if not, then we can also provide a brief moment at the end of the meeting for people that are willing and interested in making comments. So any comments right now? Okay, seeing none, then let's move on. We're waiting for Francisco to jump back in. Let's do this, Noah. Why don't we have you kick off real quick the beginning part of your conversation, and at some point in the middle we can come back to the Chancellor when he's back on. But I know we're pretty much on the same page, and can certainly provide him a space a little later in the meeting here too. So, Noah.
Okay. Well, thank you, President Vettis, and it's a pleasure to join the board again and to see a number of the LACCD colleagues joining us. Crystal has agreed kindly to assist me, so I'm going to start off with some big picture stuff to kind of frame some of the discussion that I think the board will be engaging in as we go forward. So Crystal, if I could ask you to go ahead and put the PowerPoint up. There you go.
And Noah, just so I can say this real quick, Crystal and Lupe, be mindful that the Chancellor may be coming in. So if you have to let him in, just be mindful that he may be on the wait room.
We will, thank you.
Okay, so this is just the title slide. I think we can go to the next one, Crystal. So one of the things I was asked talk briefly about were what are the major issues as we see them for community college boards going forward. Obviously, I'll talk a bit about the post-pandemic outlook. I'm going to talk a little bit about community college governance. And actually what I'm going to show you is what governance looks like around the country. And then you can see how you look relative to governance generally. I know, as Steve mentioned, you've got accreditation coming up. I'm just going to do a quick refresher primer on accreditation from the point of view of boards and how you need to think about that. Very important. And I'll just say parenthetically, this process that you're engaged in terms of board goals and evaluation is a very important component of accreditation. And the accreditors will look at that as evidence of board leadership and board direction. And then I'll talk just a bit about the national enrollment picture, which I know is a concern certainly in LA, but it's a concern for every one of your colleagues around the country. Post-pandemic issues, no surprise, enrollment will probably be the biggest challenge, not only for you, but all of your colleagues around the country. As I'll show you in a moment, enrollment is down nationally. It's down in California, obviously down in LA, although from what I understand, LA enrollment declines are roughly similar to what we're seeing across the country and also in California. So you're not completely off the pace there. But how we get people back in and how we adapt for the future will have everything to do with what our enrollment picture will look like in the future. Obviously, the issues of diversity, equity, inclusion are front and center now. It's both a function of the enrollment that we've lost and who we've lost, which affects disproportionately, obviously, students of color, students of low income, and others. And, you know, they'll be the hardest students to get back into the campuses for reasons that you all already understand and know well. And also, I think, you know, the civil unrest that we witnessed this past year. Every time I read Inside Higher Ed, I read about another college that has brought in a diversity officer that's taking a serious look at their diversity, equity, inclusion policies and how they can be more embracing their communities and their student populations. Another issue front and center is the evolving business model. We were talking just a bit before you all joined us about, quote, the new normal. Well, it's my fervent belief that we don't have a new normal. We have something completely different because we are not going to go back to business as usual. I think it's pretty safe to say that all of our colleges are going to look increasingly at some kind of a hybrid business model where you're going to have students on campus, but you're also going to have more students online. Obviously, the challenge will be in some of your programs, your vocational, technical, whether it's your culinary arts and others, nursing, very hard to do those completely online. But for a lot of other programs, I think you should imagine that you'll be online more than you've ever been. So that raises issues around technology, cybersecurity. How are you going to provide the human support services that students need to be successful? And of course, a really big question, I think, for all of you in LA is you've got tremendous physical infrastructure. And whether you will continue to need that level of physical infrastructure or whether you'll be looking at redeploying those dollars and redeploying your facilities in other ways that you might not have imagined a year ago or 2 years ago. And then lastly, you know, from my perch here in DC, I think governance and accountability continues to be a major concern. There are lots of states that are looking at our governance systems and structures and asking the question, frankly, does public governance work well in every instance? Are boards really doing the job they need to do? Are they being mindful and reflective of their community needs? Or are there other ways to do it? And then obviously with the dip in enrollment and the dip in persistence and completion, and I'll show you those numbers in a minute, that just begs the timeless question that we've always faced, which is, are we really doing students proud in terms of their ability to persist and complete, right? There was some editorials recently criticizing the free tuition movement and pointing to the fact that we continue to have very low completion and persistence numbers. So that's going to remain with us, obviously, for the next several years and beyond. Next slide, Crystal. So let me just show you briefly what your boards and colleagues look like around the country. Next slide, please. So this just shows you the gender distribution. This is based on our last citizen trustee survey in 2018. We do these about every 10 years. I'm sorry to say that the difference between 2008 and 2018 is infinitesimal. There's been almost no change in the composition of boards and trustees, which I find quite upsetting. But I guess I could look at your board and say you guys are way ahead of the curve in terms of having 7 members of the board, and you're all quite diverse, more than the country. And I'm sure that Trustee Hoffman is excited to have a new female trustee join her, because you can see the demographics here: majority male, minority female, and then some people either didn't choose to respond or identified as others. Next slide. Age distribution. Well, here we are. Not much change from 10 years ago. The majority of board members are 65 years of age and older. Again, your board is beginning to be quite different than the national average, but you see the distribution. So basically, almost 90% of all the trustees in the country are 40 years and older. And again, this hasn't changed very much over the past 10 years. Next slide. Ethnic distribution, not a great story here either. You can see that 76% of all trustees identify as white. And then you have all these smaller pie slices from various other racial and ethnic populations. Again, our boards do not look much like the student populations that we typically serve. So again, this is really contextual. So think about yourselves and your board and how you sit relative to your peer boards. I would say you guys are certainly the outliers, not the rule at this point. Next slide. This just shows you the educational attainment levels of trustees. And here you can see that about 43% have at least a master's or higher educational credential. 25% have a bachelor's degree. So the majority have a college, a baccalaureate degree or higher. And then you see the distribution of others. So we are fairly well educated as a population relative to the national average. Next slide. Income. People are always interested in this, particularly fundraisers. Well, it turns out that a good percentage of trustees have fairly good incomes. And again, slightly better than the national average. So that's something to keep in mind. I know that we did some work a few years ago on fundraising. And the issue as to whether board members should be contributors to their colleges also. So we actually outed trustees a bit on this slide to say that, yes, some of you can give some money to your local college in addition to your public broadcasting station. I don't know if LA gives out Big Bird dolls, but maybe they have some other bling for trustees who chip in. And then the other slide just shows you the occupational backgrounds of trustees. Lastly, I think political affiliation, which is always interesting, and I'm always asked this question. People always erroneously assume that somehow trustees are majority Republican and conservative. The reality is when you ask trustees to self-identify, it's almost a third, one third, Republican, Democratic, independent. Some people, I don't know what the no response, they either chose not to respond or they don't know where they are on the political spectrum. So again, it's not what people think. We're pretty evenly divided across the political spectrum. Okay, let me pause there if there are any questions or comments from board members.
Trustee Hoffman, you have a question?
I do. Thank you, Noah, for the presentation. I do have a question about, do you have the information on how many, I guess it would be by state, have appointed trustees versus elected trustees? Because couldn't that make a difference in terms of diversity?
Yeah, excellent question. And we do, board members, have that information. In fact, I'm happy to forward that to the chancellor, and he could send it out. We did a report a couple years ago where we looked at the governance structure in all 50 states. So the simple rule of thumb, Andra, is that 2/3 of all of your colleagues are appointed either by the governor or by a state legislator or a county executive, or in some cases the mayor. And then in a state like Wisconsin, the board seats are filled by a certain number of people who are nominated by the local school districts. So 2/3 are directly appointed, and that may certainly have implications. That means only 1/3 of you are elected. Now, the interesting thing is, if you look at the evolution of community college governance since our creation, and let's just say we were created in 1901 for sake of argument. If you look at the creation of colleges over time, as you moved west of the Mississippi, we'll see more elected than appointed boards. Just a little factoid for the historians in the room. So, but I will send the chancellor that other report, and it will show you, it'll not only show you, Andra, the structure in all 50 states, it also tells you which states have student trustees and whether they have votes on the board or not. So again, you can compare yourselves to your peers.
Thank you.
And colleagues, a lot of this connects to our broader discussion on governance for accreditation. So Trustee Moreno, I see your hand up.
Yes, I have a question. I don't see the chart on the occupations of the board members. I thought you had referred to it in your presentation, but I don't seem to find one.
Yeah. Ernie, yeah, I'm sorry, I went over it quickly. It's on the left side of the chart that's up now.
Oh, I see. All right, thank you.
Yeah, so you can see the distribution by major occupational classifications.
I see, okay.
No surprise that the majority come from education. And as I referenced earlier, Andra, that in Wisconsin and other states, you have, by statute, school board members, public school board members who sit on the board. So that might skew those data a little bit also.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on this part?
Just a quick question, Mr. Vettis.
Yes, Chancellor.
I'm just curious. No, just curious. Is it usual and customary to have former college presidents to serve on national governance boards like we have with Mr. Moreno? Is that usual, customary? Is that just curious?
It's not unusual, but it's rare. I can think of another colleague in California who I think was at San Bernardino, Mr. Singer. Mr. Singer was a campus president and then ultimately became a trustee. So it happens.
Don Singer, yeah.
Yeah, Don Singer, who was actually on my board at one time. So it happens.
Well, and in our case, Mr. Moreno served on 2 different college boards.
Yeah.
So, that's true. That's true.
So you're definitely the unicorn, Mr. Moreno.
Yeah, that's right. That's what I feel like.
Yeah. So, but you're not alone, Ernie. There are a few out there, and it'll be interesting to see that we may see more in the future. I don't know. because as the stakes get higher and higher for our institutions, and there's more interest and more people looking at governance with coming from various backgrounds, whether more former campus presidents and others may look to get on boards. So I have a fantasy of getting appointed to my local community college board here in Montgomery County, Maryland. Right? That would be the ultimate revenge, wouldn't it? Anyway, let's look at accreditation quickly, because I know that's coming up. So just quickly, what is the role of accreditation? Well, obviously, it's to affirm the academic legitimacy of the college. Obviously, in your case, you've got, what, 10 of those under a district. So you've got a lot of stuff that will be going on in terms of your accreditation. Obviously, it has a lot to do with sustaining, and I would say building public confidence in the college, that you're actually doing the job that you represent that you're doing to the public. Obviously, facilitating student mobility. And California, you have a very unique system in terms of the master plan and the statutory relationship that you've always had between the community colleges, the UC and USC systems. But generally, accreditation will look at those issues. How easily can students move from one institution to another, whether institutions recognize each other's credits, and whether employers recognize the training and certificates that you're awarding to students. Another important area is obviously to promote the continuous improvement of colleges, right? Boards are never satisfied, are they, Chancellor? So wherever you are today, the board will want more improvement, and that's perfectly legitimate, and accreditation will certainly look at that. And then lastly, and very important, if you're not regionally accredited, you can't be qualified for Title IV under the Federal Higher Education Act, and your students cannot receive federal student aid, which is a biggie, right? Because generally speaking, more than a third of every community college students out there receive Pell Grants. So you definitely want to get through accreditation successfully, and you don't want to lose your Title IV eligibility. I don't know, Chancellor, if you've run the numbers, but if a third or better of your students lost eligibility to Pell Grants, I don't know what that translates into dollars, but it's probably a pretty big number even by Washington standards.
Close to $100 million.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, next slide, please. So trustees have some particular roles and responsibilities when it comes to accreditation. And you should look at accreditation as your friend. Accreditation can actually help you do your jobs better. So it will look at your responsibilities relative to policies and leadership that empower academic leadership at all of your institutions, from your chancellor down through your campus presidents, to your vice presidents, to your deans, all the way to faculty. Very important thing. Obviously, financial leadership, right? You all hear a lot, probably too much, about the fiduciary responsibility of trustees. Well, I'm going to tell you that it's not just finance either. Fiduciary goes way beyond finance. It's a duty of care and responsibility to the people that put you in those chairs. So yes, it's a lot about money, but it's way beyond just money as well. And then obviously accreditation is going to support and help you have the appropriate guardrails around being effective governors, including issues of shared governance, which are very important. Next slide. Caveats and concerns. So as you go into the wonderful world known as accreditation, you need to think about a couple things. As you're going into this and looking at this, you need to pay special attention to programmatic as well as institutional accreditation. It's not just institutional, right? Some of your programs may have separate programmatic accreditation, and those are equally important, and you need to pay attention to those. Obviously, as the chancellor knows, I'm certainly Ernie knows, as a former campus president, it takes a tremendous amount of time to prepare for accreditation. And it's a very serious and a very time consuming, but a very important function. Secondly, look very carefully at anything the accreditor is recommending. And, you know, take it with a grain of salt. Not everything the accreditor may say is necessarily cause for the board to jump in and make huge changes or huge financial changes, because your job is to evaluate and assess that and make the appropriate decision in the context of your district. So again, just because the accreditor might recommend something, be deliberative as a body before you do anything and make sure that you agree with and it's appropriate for the district. And then third and most important, never let accreditors usurp your authority. You have legal authorities as a governing board, and the accreditors need to understand it and respect it. This is particularly important with respect to your chancellor and or presidents, how you approve academic programs, and your general relations with faculty, staff, and policymakers. Now, having said that, accreditors will look at your policies. They will look at how you function, how you behave, whether you follow your bylaws and your policies. So pay attention to your bylaws and your policies and your procedures. And if you do, you'll be in good stead. Lastly, I think you should look at accreditation as a partnership around building and securing your district's future. And emphasis should always be, again, on creating greater accountability, having the appropriate pressure around innovation. And when I say pressure, I tend to think of it more as carrots, not sticks. So part of what the board should think about is how do you incent innovation, right? Incent innovation. And maybe move money away from things that are no longer innovative or needed, and use those dollars to incent innovation going forward. And obviously, you always have to balance all of this with your limited financial resources, which is really the fun part, right? That's really the magic of boards, is to make tough decisions among many, many competing priorities. So the moral of the story for accreditation is view them as your friends and colleagues. And then this slide, just for you guys to have as reference, we have a report that we issued a few years ago that goes into greater detail on what I just covered. And then you see there are 7 regional accrediting bodies around the country. Obviously, you're under the Western Association. But, you know, if you can't sleep one night, you might want to look at what the other regional accrediting bodies have. They're all a little bit different. They're all not exactly the same. But obviously, as the chancellor knows, you're going to pay a particular attention to the Western Association as your regional accreditor, as well as I referenced earlier, any specialized accreditors. I don't know, Francisco, if some of your specialized programs have separate accreditation as well, whether from NIAC or the culinary arts or whatever.
Yeah, nursing. Yeah, we have about
Nursing,
15
yeah.
other accreditors.
Yeah, those are just as important because those signify that those programs are of high quality and do the job they represent they're doing. Then briefly, because I know you want to talk about this, let's look at enrollment. And so what I did is I looked at the national picture and then I related it to California. I didn't have access to your own district's enrollment, but I'm sure you have it in your heads already and you've seen it countless times. But what we have seen since the advent of the pandemic is nationally, community college enrollment is down nearly 10% across the country. And you can see the differences there. That's a big difference, 10% across the country. So, you know, that's where all your colleagues are in the aggregate. I then looked at California. California, you're almost 12% down over the same period. So actually, California is doing a little worse than the country as a whole. Now, you all know it's hard to do apples and oranges, but I'm just giving you some context here in terms of where you might be within the district. And then more disturbingly, and I think the chancellor will speak to some of this a bit later in terms of how LA is doing, but there's been a marked decline since the advent of the pandemic in first-year persistence rates after we had been stable as a sector for the last few years. In fact, some of you may know that we actually started to see the numbers increase the last few years in terms of national persistence and retention. Well, we're losing ground because of the pandemic, which is to be expected. The ultimate question is, how do we address that decline and how quickly can we turn it around? Overall persistence dropped over 2 percentage points for first-time students. It's now at its lowest level since 2012. So we went backwards almost 9 years in terms of where we were, which is, again, very upsetting. And as a sector, we had the steepest persistence rate decline over the last year of all institutional sectors. So 3.5%, 3.5% or 3.5 point decline. So that shouldn't surprise us, right? When you think about our student population, right? We serve many more vulnerable students than does higher education generally. So, you know, we have a bigger challenge to get back. So those are just some quick comparisons about what we're seeing across the country and what I was able to squeeze out of the system office there in California. And then I think, you know, you can look at your own numbers and decide where you think you fall relative to those. Let me stop there again and see if there are any questions. And then I think we're going to move on to looking at your board goals.
Okay, colleagues, if you can raise your virtual hand if you have questions. Okay, seeing none, I think the data's fairly clear. Chancellor, just to clarify, because I know some of, we actually have a range. We have schools that are right in this number, and we have schools that are lower than the number and then much higher than the number. Did you want to make a quick comment since our numbers are not exactly here? And for those that haven't had the benefit of being in the Institutional Effectiveness Committee or see the reports that have been sent out, make a few comments here.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vettis. Sure. Our overall numbers are within the range that Mr. Brown has presented. We're right in the state and national trends. Because we have 9 colleges, you will see some of our colleges faring better with respect to attracting students and enrolling students for this fall, you know, close to between 95 and 100% of last fall, and others that are much lower. So, but the overall number is still in the double digits. A matter of concern, and you have seen in the written documents, the supplemental materials that have been presented, the very specific strategies, opportunities that the college presidents see at their respective institutions, and they're all prepared to discuss those. What's also interesting is that while the national trends on persistence has gone down, our actual persistence, retention persistence, and graduation numbers have gone up. At the recent IESS meeting, Dr. Corner presented our last 3-year cohort, and the last 6 years, we've actually had more completions, a higher rate of completions, and more students getting through to college level English and math, and in particular, our college promise students outperforming our other students who are not in college promise. So we're seeing some very, very good numbers on that side of completions, persistence, and indeed graduation. So that's very, very, very good news. The last thing I'd mention, Mr. Vettis, is that, and to remind the board that we are in this quote unquote hold harmless period. The new student-centered funding formula requires that about 70% of our funding come from enrollments, another 20% is derived from the student profile and the types of students that we serve. And the last 10% is based on our completion. So in the 20 and 30% that column, we're actually faring very well and hitting the marks on those. At the enrollment piece, not so much, but because we are held harmless through the 23-24 academic year, right now, at this moment, we are not feeling the effects of lower enrollments as it stands right now. So the plan is between now and the end of 23-24 is to restore our enrollments just as strongly as we can. We've gone down significantly in our FTES over the last 5 years. And that's important to note that. It's also important to note that last spring of 2020, and I'll end with this, spring of 2020, we actually grew by 0.74 or so percent, just under 1%. We actually grew compared to the year before, which was lower than the year before, admittedly. But we had believed that we had hit the bottom, if you will, and we're starting to curve back up. And then March 2020, the pandemic hit and exacerbated enrollment loss. So that is true. And now we're experiencing that. So it's important to understand that we're currently financially stable. We have seen enrollment loss over the last 5 years, but we are seeing persistence and graduation rates and numbers go up. And then when we get to learning loss, I'll ask Dr. Corner to talk about AB 705, its impact, the throughput, and what we're doing around that issue as well.
And if I might, Chancellor, we were very fortunate to help leverage 3 different federal stimulus packages for the sector. I think between the 3 packages, we leveraged over $20 billion for our colleges, which if you'd asked me about it a year ago, I would have said you're crazy to think that could happen. I bring it up only because a lot of colleges, including LA, were allowed to use some of those funds to address enrollment declines, technology needs, which is great. I would simply suggest to the board as you move forward, because those monies are going to go away. We're in our last round here now with the American Rescue Plan.
Mhm.
I don't know if you still have any CARISA funds left, but certainly the American Rescue Plan funds. Take a good look at some of the things that you were able to do with those funds and see which ones were very successful and whether you could continue to embrace those or replicate those going forward as strategies for dealing with enrollment.
Yes.
So just a suggestion there, because
Yes.
there was a lot of innovation
That's correct.
that we've seen that I think could be the hallmark of our institutions going forward.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Brown, for triggering that. Mr. Vettis, it might be important to note that the district received through the CARES and through HERF 1 and 2 about $368 million, 152 of which was for direct student aid. The balance, the majority of that also went to student aid and is also assisting us with revenue loss and other important areas. So as Ms. Gordon is here, and if the board wants to get into the strategy we've used, we can certainly talk about that as well.
Okay. Okay. Trustee Moreno, real quick, since I know you have your hand up, but I just wanted to be clear. We're going to have a piece of the agenda exclusively to enrollment conversations in just about 30 minutes here.
Okay.
So to ask if you wanted to save your comment to that, because I think you want to get into that piece of it, but was there anything technical on what's here? If not, then if you can save that for when we're all going through the deep enrollment conversation.
Yeah, well, yeah, we can hold back. I don't need to talk about it right now.
Okay, sounds good. So it'll come up right after we review the goals really quickly. So, okay, Chancellor, thank you for that. Noah, let's move on to the next piece here.
Okay. So let's look at this chart. Should look familiar to you by now, but this is the chart that was revised after the board retreat and discussion. I think it was in February, if I'm not mistaken, where we looked at the previous year. We reviewed the current goals, and then we had, I think, a very robust discussion on adding some new goals and to do some nuance around the existing goals. So this should just be a refresher for now, really to set the table for the conversation as you move forward in the balance of today's program. So you'll recall that your goals are now organized under some broad buckets. So under your first priority, which is ensuring district sustainability, a lot of discussion and a lot of consensus around adding new goals and imperatives around the concept of right sizing, which is probably more important now than even it was in February or a year ago, because things are not going to be the same going forward. So now you have a big job to do in making sure that your campuses are scaled correctly and they play to their strengths, because there's no student to waste, right? And no dollars to waste. So right sizing is going to be, I think, a very important issue for the board and with the administration as you go forward. Another area dealt with foundations. Again, as all those federal stimulus dollars disappear, the ability to identify and leverage new sources of revenue is going to be critically important. And I don't have to tell you, you have many, many foundations already within the district, within your institutions and elsewhere. What can the board do, and how can the board think about leveraging those as essentially a sector across the district to really identify new funding streams? Obviously, we were going to continue to look at the District Educational Service Center. There's some goals there. There's work continuing in that area, as well as the district organizational chart continues to be in progress. And again, obviously, with all other things, as you go forward and move into the brave new world, you want to make sure you're looking carefully at your human capital and human resources, which I know is also a item on your agenda. Next slide. Continuing on, we have obviously a few that are going to continue. Land development acquisition. This might take on a whole different set of meanings and connotations in the future now, particularly if you maintain a certain percentage of online learning versus in classroom instruction. Teaching effectiveness, I don't think that's ever going to go away. And now you're going to be looking probably even more intensively at online learning and how effective that is and what you needed to support faculty to make them successful, as well as students. Not all students were equipped to be effective online. So there may be a different set of priorities there to assist students. That led to a new recommendation that's been added as of February, which is looking at the broader bucket of teaching effectiveness. And this is where the concept of lost learning really came in. There was a lot of concern from the board back in February about that concept, which I think is legitimate. And I know you're going to talk about that in the context of enrollment and other things yet today and as you move forward. Next slide. And then lastly, a continuing one has to do with continuing to improve your skills and your functionality as a board. This is very important now as you head into accreditation. You don't want the board coming in and asking questions about your effectiveness. So you got to bring your A game as you have been bringing this past year and beyond. So stick with it there. Next slide. Second priority area, addressing student basic needs. An area that will continue, obviously, is student support services. Lots of work going on there. Things you'll be seeing and hearing more about. I'm sure many of this Chancellor has addressed in the magnum opus that you provided to the board the other day. Lot of information in there, incredible amount of information. A new area that the board added was in the area of student support services, but this really had to do with drilling even further down on sort of the human needs of students, particularly in the wake of the pandemic and the economic recession. So again, doubling down on issues of food insecurity, clothing, housing, mental health, etc. These are very important, and it's exciting to see a special priority being placed there. Student housing partnerships continues to be a work in progress, a lot of work going on there. And so that will remain on your work plan for the balance of this year. Next slide. And then another new area in terms of student needs, again, housing partnerships. And I think there was a lot of discussion in February about how you might think differently about this and how you may expand the definition of partnerships and how you can sort of reach the sweet spot between whether you're building buildings, acquiring existing buildings, forming partnerships with other organizations that could solve some of your housing needs and facility needs. You know, these are all very appropriate areas for the board to remain focused around. Next slide. Priority 3, creating greater equity and inclusion. Well, again, this was one of our post-pandemic priorities. This isn't going to go away. If anything, it's going to take on increased importance. So you have a number of goals that you created a year ago that remain extremely high, and the work continues there. Areas around student community outreach focus, making sure that you're an inclusive district, that everybody feels at home and safe and secure in the district programs and services. Secondly, obviously, growing enrollment. That will always probably be on the list, Chancellor, because that's what makes the merry-go-round, typically in institutions. That remains a very high priority for the board, and a lot of work continues in that area. Next slide. With special emphasis around growing enrollment, the board added kind of a new nuance issue around this, which is to look at more of a 64,000 foot or a blue sky level at the issue of enrollment generally, to get a better handle on what's happening now and what the future might look like and how you can get more creative and more innovative. You know, one thing the pandemic is teaching us is that we can change and we can pivot and we can do things differently. The question now becomes, of the things that you're doing differently, what is the legacy of those changes? How effective are they? And are they going to be really good levers in the future around enrollment growth, and particularly serving new and different student populations? I'll just say, Chancellor, parenthetically, one area that continues to be ripe for work in enrollment is the adult population. There are 35 million adults in this country with some educational, some college under their belt and no credential. And so as we are experiencing greater enrollment pressures because the high school population will decline, there's still all these adults out there in the greater Los Angeles area and beyond who you might want to target to bring back and help them get a credential, complete their college, whatever it is they need, because they're out there. Continuing on, again, a medium priority, administration and faculty hiring. This will remain a good priority for the board. Again, I think the board is acutely aware that as time goes on, more and more of your faculty will be aging, and you're going to have to backfill more and more of those positions. The question is, how can you both increase diversity among faculty, but also what are your academic and programmatic service priorities? In other words, what kind of faculty should you be looking to hire as you go forward? Because all of these things are interrelated. Next slide. Priority 4. Obviously, this became a brand new priority for you a year ago with the COVID response, issues of equity, racial equality, social justice. I don't think we have fixed those problems yet, have we? So this is going to be a continuing work in progress for the board. There's still a tremendous amount of work and repair that needs to be done around the civil unrest racial injustice and other inequities. It goes without saying, community colleges have a huge role they can play in being a bridge for many, many people in this area. And then, of course, a new priority that was added that I think Chancellor is going to be very much a conversation going forward is, how do you reopen fully, if that's what you're going to do? Will all campuses reopen fully? Will each campus have a different plan? Will each campus have a very different ratio going forward of in-person versus online? These are very important questions for the board and the leadership going forward. And I think, President Perez, as we were talking about just before we went live, it's okay if every campus has a different strategy, because every campus is in a different geographic location and serves a different blend of students. So a one-size-fits-all is definitely not going to work for you. So pay particular attention to that. Next slide. All right. I have also included here, just for your reference, these were a lot of goals that you worked on over a year ago. That when we had our final year-end review, there was agreement that most of these had been completed. So this is just a reminder of the work that has been completed in the past year. Obviously, the goals that are in progress remain on your work plan, along with the goals that have been added as of February. So next slide. This is really just for the board's reference. And so you can see those in each priority area that were completed based on the board's priorities. So again, you can look at those at your leisure. And that concludes my formal presentation. I'm going to go on mute for a minute because somebody's mowing my lawn.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. So looking at so are there any questions from the board on what's been presented thus far? Yes, Ms. Hoffman.
Thank you, Noah, for your presentation. Are we going to have an opportunity to talk more about right sizing and some of the other goals later in the retreat, or is now the time to talk about that?
We can. There are statements by each of the college presidents. So if you want to talk about it in general, it is part of the board goals. But if you want to talk about a college in particular, the presidents are here. It is in your supplemental materials. So was there a general question, Ms. Hoffman? My sense is, go ahead, please.
I mean, I thoroughly read through my supplemental materials.
Go ahead, please.
I think there is no consensus or definition of what we mean by right sizing, which I realized as I was reading through all the president's reports. And so while we've had that as a goal for some time, I guess we didn't define what we mean by right sizing.
Yeah.
So in some definitions, they're talking about reducing salaries, which I don't know how you can do that individually on a campus. And in others, it's something else. So I would like to have a broader discussion. If it's not today, that's fine. But I think we need to come to some kind of an understanding of what do we mean by right sizing.
Okay. Let me give a general response, if I might, and then we could certainly have a deeper discussion if there's time today, or agendize it again. Mr. Vettis, we're fielding questions from the board here. Our approach to right sizing was answering the question as to, do we have enough staff in the right places to meet the student demand and to serve students in an efficient and expert way? And this was in particular in the context of this latest SERP, in which just over 350 individuals from various groups, mostly classified and mostly full-time faculty, took the SERP. So as we start to rethink about distributing that FTE, the resources to where they might need most, what does that look like? Are there programs that aren't as efficient that are now eligible or could be contenders for program discontinuance? Are there programs that should be bolstered and fortified because there's an increased student demand or workforce demand? So that was the context in which the college presidents are looking at the right sizing, looking at their personnel. So when they said reducing salaries, I sense that means they're looking at the SERP, whether there might be some salary savings in a particular area that could be realized while putting in resources into other growth areas. So that's I think the way we took the definition and the exercise.
Okay, and I understand that, and I think that's valuable information, and I think that also goes along with right sizing. But I think when we first put right sizing as a goal, obviously it was pre-pandemic, it was pre-SERP, and it was looking at enrollment on some of our smaller campuses and wondering, do we need the same level of administrative support on every single campus, given that each campus is unique and very different in enrollment and enrollment growth and decline. And so I would like to have a broader discussion about that, because I thought we were going to come up with some creative ideas in terms of administrative support on some of those campuses. But again, if we don't have time today, we can discuss it at a later date.
Trustee, well, let me say this in general, and I apologize that Zoom sort of kicked me out. I don't know if it's my internet or Zoom, probably my internet here, but I did want to sort of note that we have 3 deeper dive conversations. Some of the staffing conversation can sort of go into the right sizing, could go into staffing. It's a little bit more amorphous. So, it's an opportunity to go deeper into that one. So as we go through these goals and objectives, I just wanted to pay mind that we have 3 things we're going to separate to go deeper. It's my hope to get through the other questions now on the things that are on the table. But Trustee Hoffman, I think a little bit of this right sizing conversation can actually be, brought back up into one of those core conversation points after we do this. So, was there any other questions or comments about the goals outside of the 3 core ones for conversation that are listed on that screen? That were listed on that screen. Nope. Okay, sounds good. Then let's move on to the next part, and I think we're going to get very close to our deeper dive here. So, Chancellor or Noah.
Yes, I think Noah and Mr. Vettis, I think let's get into the campus enrollments conversation. That is an area of interest, of focus for this body. The college presidents and/or their designees are online now. You've each talked about and have seen some of the information that's been presented in the supplemental information. Let me contextualize the growing enrollments conversation, and then I know Mr. Moreno had a question, and then the college presidents are ready to chime in. We're doing a lot of important things at the same time, and enrollment is not a singular activity. A lot of factors influence a person's decision to sustain themselves, to maintain the enrollment, to sustain their persistence from semester to semester, to complete their goals, and then the attraction of new students through to our colleges. Over the last 2.5 years, we have focused on 4 areas of enrollment growth as our pillars for LACCD. One is on dual enrollment. Since the passage of Assembly Bill 288, Mr. Holden's bill, we have accelerated our CCAP agreements, which are the formal agreements with our local school districts that allow us to teach college courses at their institutions. We have proliferated that. So we can talk about dual enrollments, concurrent enrollment at each of our colleges, or any that you want to pick or look at deeper. So that's strategy 1, dual enrollment. Second one was through College Promise. And we've had tremendous success. We're now in our 5th cohort of College Promise. We were first in line in 2017 to push that program forward. And as the college presidents and Dr. Corner will attest, those students are outperforming. So we're getting a larger lion's share of LAUSD and other school district and charter school students coming to our institutions full-time through the College Promise program and everything that involves that. That's 2. 3 is that Mr. Noah Brown pointed this out, adult learning, adult education. We have looked at that as a growth opportunity for us. Dr. Smith and I just did a recent walkthrough through the Vandy camp and have some really strong ideas about how through LACCD College, we could build a very strong regional adult education presence there with Dean Adrienne Ann Mullen, who's out there, and really utilize that facility in a much more robust way. And lastly, and this will, I think, bring a smile to your face, we wanted to proliferate online education. Well, I think we've done that. Will we go back? We were 18-19% pre-pandemic. Clearly, we're much higher than that now. This fall, board members should know we're going to average somewhere around 30%. 2 or 3 of our colleges are in the 40% on ground classes. But when we all settle, I do think it's going to be a 30 or 70-30 split, 70 on ground, 30 online. So those have been the 4 areas that the college presidents have emphasized over the last 2.5, 3 years. So we're happy to take a deep dive, Mr. Vettis, into any one of the colleges or just speak about it broadly.
Let's do this since we're doing fine on time. I'll give a time check in the agenda here. So what I'd like to do is we have 9 colleges. I'd like to have each president or vice president that's representing do 5 minutes about the plan that's been submitted to us. Those 45 minutes, colleagues, will take us up to just about 11 o'clock. We'll take a 5-minute break and then we'll come back. We'll ask questions on those plans presented, and then we'll, we'll do it in 25-minute chunks, the next 2 dialogue points. Okay, so let's college presidents, if you can do 5 minutes, and I'm gonna just take it by my Hollywood Squares order. Who's up? Let's see. I guess it starts off with Luis Dorado, President Dorado at Harbor. You get the joy of kicking us off. So 5 minutes, and I'll watch your time. And we do have the materials. This is part of the materials sent to us yesterday, colleagues. If you can talk about it. Chancellor, did we want to share screen, or are we able to share screen, or could we just reference the documents that were sent to us?
I think the college presidents could just talk through in the 5 minutes that they have. And then we asked them to focus in on right sizing, foundation, student support services, and growing enrollments. So why don't we focus in on the last element of the reports on growing enrollments, as this is the focus, but the other elements are there. So Dr. Dorado, let's start with growing enrollments at Harbor. Then Mr. Vettis, just go ahead and name the next college.
Got it. Sounds good. Luis, you're on.
Thank you. And I don't mind. Harbor loves setting the bar all the time. Just letting you guys know. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to present to the board of what Harbor is doing. And of course, Harbor College, we pride ourselves in our intrusive outreach and recruitment. And then we have our program was called Harbor Advantage that we've taken plenty of advantage of in regards to our recruitment strategies. If you look at our student center funding formula, when you combine all the components, you're looking at us at being at the top, although we're at the top with a lower enrollment, which we're going to work to continue to grow it. So what we're doing at Harbor is continuing to be very intrusive with how we reach out to students. Before the pandemic, we invested a lot in our outreach team. Our outreach team was out there at our feeder schools, meeting with them on a weekly basis. Our relationships with the counselors from the career centers and the outreach offices over there, critical to our outreach strategy. Pandemic hit, we had to refocus, and we did our live Zooms. So we continue to do our live Zooms with our students, and which has been very popular. But one of the things that we do is called early decision. And Trustee Bona called me out on, I want to say when the first numbers for the summer came out, because we were at the bottom, but our early decision depends on our high touch with our students, because we get them through the pipeline and it's our onboarding process with them. So our early decision is a variety of events that take place throughout the year, where we continuously work with the students. And at the end of the day, they come on campus when we were pre-pandemic, but now it's our virtual early decision day where we do the onboarding for them. We also do their abbreviated ed plans at the high school with them so that they have their first semester ed plan ready to go. When they come to Harbor College and we enroll them in their summer bridge program, which is our Harbor Advantage. And through that summer bridge program, we enroll them in a counseling course. And that counseling course, then we develop their comprehensive ed plans. So throughout that, that's our enrollment process. We also are doing some marketing components. We're doing some social media. Social media is huge. We're currently working on a TikTok contest with our students. We're asking them to tell us why Harbor, and we're going to send it out to our whole student body, because one of the things that we're also working on currently is our in-reach of our students that were here pre-pandemic and that are no longer here with us. So we're reaching out to them. I'm personally making phone calls. I'm asking my VPs. So we're all making phone calls. We all have our list of phone calls to make to invite our students back. The other component is the social media ads that we send out. And again, critical to this is us answering our phones. And right now we're answering our phones through Fresh Caller and Fresh Desk. So we continue to do that. And then we've kept our relationships with our high schools. And so you see our CCAP agreements, we actually increased our CCAP. And so we're going to continue to capitalize on that. And then we're working on our adult ed. I've made some changes in our leadership in adult ed to take us, and because that's an area of growth for us at Harbor College. So we're looking at all those components, and all together, we're looking at rebounding and bringing us back to hopefully as close as possible to our Fort Harmless FTEs that we're funded for. So those are the components that we currently are instituting and have been working hard on. So thank you for letting me present.
Good, you hit 5 minutes on the dot. That's perfect. Okay, and again, colleagues, we're gonna do all the presentations first, and then in our dialogue, you can pinpoint anything that was said or noted, and et cetera. And so we'll say that.
Can I?
Yes, trustee.
Yeah, I was suggesting, rather than, I know we're going to go through these each 5 minutes, but it'd be worthwhile to see. We've had these enrollment presentations for, I don't know, every year since I've been a board member. And each year, my question is, what is it we are doing differently or will be doing differently than we've been doing the last 4 or 5 years? Because each year we've had an enrollment presentation, and each year we've declined. So the question is, what are we going to be doing differently? In light of the fact that our enrollment plans that we've instituted in the past have not seemed to be successful. So what have they done differently, or what will they be doing differently than the enrollment plans that they've presented to us in the past?
So trustee, and I think we can ask them to keep that in mind in their presentation now. We can certainly follow up, but let me put it another way, because I had a question probably on a similar basis, is that we've had enrollment plans, and was the challenge implementation? Were we challenged to implement the many plans that have been put on the table? And I've seen 9 years worth of them. Ernie's seen, I don't know, 30, 40 years of them, Ernie.
Yeah.
You didn't cover yourself, so, but is it an implementation issue or what? And what is this one now? Because this is more different than any other time, considering we've gone fully remote and now we're coming back to it in person. But again, if you can include that in terms of some of your conversation, Luis, you were the start-off kickoff guinea pig here, but we can certainly get back to Harbor and the general conversation. But if the others can include some of that in their dialogue. Okay, let me jump to let's see who's next on the list here. Let's jump over to Barry Grubbins and President Grubbins over at Valley College.
Thank you. And I'll try to draw the emphasis on what's new and different, but it fits nicely with the chancellor's categories as well. So the first, dual enrollment, that is an area of major expansion for us. Pre-pandemic, about 2 years ago, we were at 40 sections. per semester. This upcoming fall, we're moving to 99 sections, which is a nice growth, especially in the pandemic. Our ultimate goal is to get to 275 sections per semester. At that level, we think that we're going to really have a dramatic impact on the college going rates in the community. With College Promise, we are working at making some changes this fall so that we more intentionally move students through the major elements of Promise and don't lose out any students as we sometimes have. Adult Ed, we did two new things. One was we're going to double the number of short-term academies that we do, the MTA and the manufacturing academies. We also deployed new non-credit 21st century skills that have a really wide appeal for folks that are incumbent workers. Specifically related to the pandemic and recovering from the pandemic, we started about 2 months ago doing some phone banking. So we hired reg assistants to call literally all 30,000 students who have had contact with us since last spring. Many of them stopped out. It's typical that students stop out from the spring to the fall semester for a variety of reasons and over the course of a year. Obviously, that was more so this last year. So our reg assistants are calling the students one by one, the 30,000 students one by one. They've so far called about 19,000, and we're going to be increasing the number of reg assistants for the final 6 weeks. So we actually increase the frequency of those calls and the number of folks, and then we'll circle back. They asked students if they're planning on registering for the fall semester. Many have indicated that they're planning on registering. So those who haven't yet registered in August, they'll circle back and reconnect with them, almost like a get out the vote campaign, where they're getting into that final push and getting folks to the polls. In this case, getting folks to register. Closely tied with that, this year, we received a list of all high school seniors, graduating seniors and incoming seniors in LA Unified in each of our service areas from Mr. Boyer and Dr. Corder. This is absolutely huge, having that list, and it's both addresses and phone numbers. So we're going to be calling each and every one of those students. We already did one robocall to them. We're sending them items over the next couple of weeks. The first is going out this week, and then we'll follow up starting next week with individual phone calls to this group of students, as well as I'll just keep following up with them. Similarly to we're doing the phone banking for the others. This is really helpful for us, both for the high school seniors and of course, with helping promoting the dual enrollment programs. And then the other major thing that I'd like to mention is reopening. We are reopening all services, all student services, July 26th. So at the end of next week, a week from yesterday, we'll start pushing out major announcements that we're open. And there's already some indication that having in-person services is going to help, especially with the students that we lost. Obviously, the students who have thrived during the pandemic with online services and with online classes, we'll just continue to serve them. But we're especially worried about all the students that we lost. So we'll really be driving those messages that we're open. We do have about half of our classes, 49% of our classes are on campus or hybrid. So the major focus for these last 5 weeks is really getting out the message about those.
Okay. Thank you, President Grubbins. Next, Jim Limbaugh, West LA, and then after Jim, East LA.
Thank you, President Bettis. I'll start by being brutally honest. West is having to completely reposition itself. We were growing steadily for the past 5 years because of our online enrollments. Go back and look at the numbers, you will see that very clearly. For example, our summers and our winters were very good for us. And some summers we would have between 600 and 800 students from Pierce College alone attending West online because Pierce didn't have a strong online program. Well, now that the pandemic has hit, West is one of 9 colleges that has online programs. So with that in mind, we are looking at how do we redirect and re-envision the institutions, since that 40% of online enrollments is no longer there. So in terms of things we're doing different in response to Trustee Moreno's point, we developed a 5-year enrollment management plan, which is completely based in data that we've evaluated, looking at dual enrollment, adult learners, formerly incarcerated, and other particular areas that have possibility for the institute. We are shifting resources, if you'll notice in the report I wrote, to more on-the-ground recruiters. West had a very small recruiting. We're increasing our recruiters by 3. We're hiring an individual to manage our Black Student Union initiative. We are hiring an individual to stabilize our police officer preparation program. And we're hiring a full-time individual to support our basic initiative. All of these will help with our recruitment. We are also looking at developing, and with credit to Dr. Grubbins and the Student Parent Center, a version of Valley College's Student Parent Center to support our student parents. Also important that since my arrival, we've completely rebuilt the foundation. The foundation now has 9 very strong board members. We're in the middle of a significant fundraising, which is benefiting to our students, and we believe that will help our role. And we've already opened. We opened Monday. The opening went pretty well. Number of foot traffic is coming in, but what you're going to see at West, for example, about 19% of our classes are online so far this fall. And what we're facing is students are preferring our own, on ground, and students are preferring our online courses. Our enrollment in non-ground classes is somewhat anemic. That is what's happening with West. We're looking at this as a year to reconsider who we are, what our market is, how we build out programs. You saw in our report our focus on CPE. We're building in our film program to include such things as production accounting and location management in response to the film industry nearby. So that is, in a very medium-sized nutshell, what's happening at West. Thank you for the time.
Okay. Thank you, President Limbaugh. Next, President Roman.
Thank you, Trustee President Bettis, Trustees, Chancellor. As you know, one of the biggest challenges I think the colleges have faced is really for students to remain connected and to get the proper support. In addition to students who have opted simply just not to enroll, we saw a significant drop in first-year students. So this is where our outreach and marketing has become most important. We're taking a multi-pronged approach with some high-level strategies, things like billboards and large signs placed throughout the community, really getting down to the grassroots strategies, from phone banking to actually knocking on doors and really reaching our K-12 partners and community partners. So let me get into some of the things that I think are unique for us this year in terms of how we're approaching outreach. We launched what we call the 50 Calls Challenge, which is a call to action to all faculty, staff, and administrators to actually sign up to make at least 50 calls to students. So far, we launched on Wednesday. We have 250 folks already signed up to make 50 calls. This includes staff, includes faculty, it includes administrators. The idea here is to make an initial connection with the students who are enrolled in the spring or the summer, but have not yet enrolled in the fall. The idea here is to get a sense of what's going on, what are the barriers, and what do we need to do to make sure that they're enrolled for the fall. It's about 10,000 students. That in itself alone is an endeavor. The idea here is not just to make the call. The idea is to have a follow-up. So we have strike teams we put together in counseling, financial aid, registration, DSPS, and all the support services. And once we know what the issue is with the student, we made a commitment to make a follow-up call within 48 hours to that student. If it was counseling, a counselor will reach out and talk to them again and say, understand you have issues with counseling, financial aid, registration. So the follow-up and closing the loop within the 48 hours is absolutely important for us. But the initial call is to figure out and triage what's going on with the student. We've committed that every classified staff member will take 15 minutes out of their daily schedule to make at least 3 calls. That's in addition to the 250 folks that are calling. We've worked with the union on this and they're in support of this. So we have a couple hundred classified staff members that will be making these calls daily. We hired 55 and they've been clear to start working peer navigators, student workers to do follow-up calls as well. So our goal is that to make about 65 to 70,000 calls, go back to the students that we had before that are not enrolled and figure out what the barriers are and what do we need to do as an institution to make sure that they get the appropriate support to get them back on board. We're assembling teams of about 150 people. We'll begin actually knocking on doors starting on the weekends in August. You know, we have a percentage of students who have enrolled. They've taken the classes. They're 2/3 of the way from completing, but have dropped off. They drop off at the 45 unit mark or close their 2. So our goal is to reach out to them in person, literally go to their homes and knock on their homes and help them re-enroll so that they can complete their certificates, their degrees. And we have about 2,000 to 2,500 students per term that are that close to completing, but have decided not to enroll. So we're figuring out what happened there. We're gonna go knock on doors and try to reach out to those 2,500 students beginning in August. We're also, this is new, we're working with LAUSD and our area superintendent to what will look like a very promising commitment to actually have every high school senior within our service area enrolled to take at least 1 dual enrollment class. Talking about thousands of students here. So it'd be a remarkable action. It's, we look to see possibly about 3,000 FTES if this is to take place, to make sure that students get exposed to college through ELAC. Those that were marginal in terms of deciding whether or not to go to college, this would be a great opportunity for them to actually complete a college course. Those that had never thought about going to college, this will be a great opportunity for them to be exposed. And again, we're gonna do it through ELAC and through our dual enrollment program. In addition to that, we have actually hired additional support on the back end. You know, our marketing efforts and our outreach efforts are only as good as our ability to respond to the students. If the calls are not being answered, if the emails are not being responded to, that in itself is going to be a barrier, a significant barrier. And we've seen it on the throughout the time we've been online. So we're hiring additional back-end support to make sure we're responsive to our students and to make sure that you know, students get the appropriate help immediately. And the last thing I'll mention in terms of new things, I mean, we're doing a lot of other marketing efforts that are in the report, but we have and we will be launching 15 new online programs. These are going to be short-term courses that are sequenced and that will be available to students online. We know everybody's online now, but as we get out of the pandemic, the chancellor mentioned we could be 70-30. These will be fully online programs that folks can take in a period of 2 years to complete their degrees. This is where we need to be more competitive as we're looking at online into the future. You know, convenience and flexibility is important for our students. As you know, other of our competitors, that's what their market. Convenience, flexibility, short-term classes, do it in 2 years. So we have some core programs that we've launched or will be launching this fall that are programs that typically we've not necessarily had online before. We have a lot of online programs on the CT and education side, but not in our core service area. So I think that will also help in terms of providing more access and more opportunity for students who simply want to do their full programs online. So those are some of the new things that we're looking at. But again, really a grassroots efforts to try to get students back connected. And there's no better way for us to market or outreach than either in person or making phone calls and reaching out to students. We do text messages, we do emails, but the idea here is human connection. I think that's ultimately the efficacy and the biggest way we can get our students back to enroll.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, President Roman. Next, we'll jump over to Mission College and President Ornelas.
Hi, good morning, trustees. Excited to be here, join my first board retreat. And as you can imagine, it's been an exhilarating last couple of weeks. I guess technically this is day 17 on the job. And the most important matter on, I think, all of our minds is enrollment. And really developing a sense of urgency on our colleges on how we're going to try to reconstruct or re-engage in this post-pandemic environment. And I think all of us are trying what we can and trying to think out of the box. And, you know, at Mission, what we've done is sort of bifurcated our efforts, if you will, where we've got an all hands on deck, boots on the ground strategy alongside with some of our more long-term systemic enrollment goals that you've been hearing about. And I imagine Trustee Moreno was alluding to earlier. But boots on the ground, it's been developing strategies for community outreach events. Literally, we have a team at our local swap meet today. I've been receiving pictures of folks interacting at the swap meet as we're sitting through this meeting. We've got campus engagement events going on. Earlier this week on Wednesday, we had Eagles for early enrollment. So every Wednesday is designated for EEE events, combined with enroll and get your vaccine. We were fortunate, we had over 200 students come. It's designed as a one-stop shop where through the whole enrollment process, you come, if you've got your ID already, then you're gonna leave with registered for courses, your financial aid, the whole gamut. We've got, as President Obama and my other colleagues have mentioned, a robust phone banking campaign going on where, you know, we've identified students. We have close to 5,000 students who were enrolled in 2021 who haven't enrolled for the fall. So we're calling them and saying, we're Mission's back, we're here. Ryan's office gave us a list of our high school graduates from our feeder schools. We have a list of over 6,000 students that we're calling. We're calling students who've started or completed their CC apply and haven't registered for courses. So very targeted phone banking efforts that we have going on. And of course, our marketing, strategic marketing strategies. We've trying to capture our different audiences. Our younger folks, a lot of social media presence. Our older folks are adult eds, you know, we've got billboards going on. We've got mailers that we're trying to complete to get mailed out to the community. So targeting our marketing depending on who the audience is. So sort of the initial strategy, the all hands on deck, all corners of the campus come together, we're doing this. But then of course, we've got our longer term strategies that include the, re-engaging our high schools. We were going back in the fall, we've got probably about 75 courses planned for dual enrollment. The college, right just before I got here, had already started the process of hiring an adult ed dean to obviously grow the adult ed area, grow the partnerships in the community. We've recently met with Chief from Probation, Adolfo Gonzalez, to build the relationship with offering the courses in the local camps. And, constantly assessing, looking at striking the right balance between what should stay online, what should come in person. Currently, we've got, about 20% of our courses are in person. We're looking to, I could see us going up to 25, 30%. That's a gradual increase of our in-person. Our student support services, we've been back since July 5th. We officially opened our in-person, gradually increasing more hours, bringing our classified folks, phasing them in. Again, we started July 5th. So far, it's been going rather smooth. what we learned on Wednesday is that there's definitely a set of students that want in-person services. So savvy as our young students are, our students were there, they need the hand holding, they need help. So we really have to rely on bringing back our in-person student support services and in-person instruction. Our students literally said, help me enroll in classes that are all in person. So, you know, there's a demand there, and we need to figure out that balance. You know, and to that note, you know, we're working with our research folks to develop a daily dashboard to track this. You know, what's you know, we got to look at the data to inform our boots on the ground strategies. How many more applicants did we get? You know, are they fully enrolled? Are they on financial aid? And really track them and do the follow-up and the case management. Just quickly, you know, we're also looking at the short-term adult ed curriculum. Just before I got there, the faculty had already engaged in curriculum development on the adult ed side of the house, because it's free, because it's short-term, really looking to be responsive in this post-pandemic. You know, we've got our unemployment rates through the roof. How do we create short-term adult ed programs where students can walk away with training and make them more competitive for the job market? So I'll stop there if anyone has any questions.
Okay. We'll take questions at the end. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
And let's jump over next to President Aguiar at Pierce.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Ditto to many of the comments that have been made by my colleagues, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. One of the things that I've done in the last couple of weeks, I feel like I've gone on a tour of every committee that Pierce has, meeting with the Boot Hill family, meeting with every single union, to see and identify challenges. The focus, the Enrollment Management Committee has done an amazing job in the past 2 years. To be just very transparent, the issue at Pierce has been implementation. Amazing plans, ideas, but the barrier to implementation exists throughout. I can see it, feel it. So what I've tried to do with the team is really identify self-inflicted barriers that we have implemented at our institution that are preventing our students from enrolling. One of the things that was identified was that normally we have students that go into the probation status, and at Pierce that normally reflects approximately 300 students in over 3 semesters. And what we found was that tripled. So the registrar implemented an electronic petition process that the students could respond. It ended up being approximately 7,000 students that were negatively impacted by the pandemic, which resulted in a W, a D, or an F, and took them below the 2.0 level. So we are targeting that. Within 12 hours, we had 95 students reinstated to be able to enroll and had their financial aid reestablished. So those are the kinds of things that I'm finding, that these are individuals that are already part of Pierce, and it is so much easier from a marketing standpoint to really target those people that we are losing for some reason. It's going to be the fastest turnaround. Yes, our outreach team, we now have an outreach coordinator. She happens to have come to us from CSUN. She's connected to CSUN, so the intent now is to try to see if we can get some communication from Pierce to the CSUN students that were not accepted into CSUN, and invite them to our campus with a flyer that we have that promotes all of our programs. We are doing, we are trying to do all of the marketing with the high school students, the 6,500 students. Normally Pierce has go days, and they normally start 1 week before the semester starts. They're going to start the beginning of August, if not the last week of July. We're going to implement more of those days so that we can create more of a presence on the campus and activities. We are also sending out, we're identifying students by major. And I think this is, I know this is a proven thing because I did that at my old place. The identifying students and then linking them specifically to the program mapper that gives them the list of classes for their major. That's a very niche market type of approach. The chairs are loving it. The faculty wants to do it. And probably one of the most, and so that seems to have been, it was very welcomed by every faculty I have spoken to. So the leadership is going to do that. Our researcher is going to provide them that type of information. They're going to customize their emails from each department, and we're going to target students that have stopped out. One thing that I know is stopping peers from moving forward is that we have a system where we only allow 5 to 10 students on wait lists. That's disastrous from an enrollment management standpoint. We need to have larger wait lists in our classes because that is how we identify demand. So I'm trying to really instill a demand and supply type of culture because that is how we know which one of our programs our students want. So that is going to also help us grow in some areas, then look at some other areas that maybe are in a decline. So I'm going to, my goal in the next few weeks to work, the next week is to work with the union, more importantly with the faculty, because that is a self-inflicted barrier. And so my promise to them is give me 20 and I'll give you a class. Because that is the way we're going to grow in the areas where we have certainty and it reduces the risk to the institution to grow. So I'll answer questions there. I just don't want to repeat many of the things and ideas that the other institutions have shared.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, President Aguirre. Let me jump over to, I believe, Jim Lancaster is here for City. Yes, Jim, we're bouncing around. Where's there you are. All right, so on behalf of President Gallagher, so Jim Lancaster from City College.
Yes, President Gallagher sends her greetings. She's actually celebrating her mother's 90th birthday today in Riverside with her family. So she has a large family, so sorry she couldn't be here.
I don't know we accept that.
I will try to hit the stuff that Trustee Moreno wanted us to include as well here, in addition to what Mary had submitted to the Chancellor and to the trustees. As far as some big things that we'll talk about is our Outreach Welcome Center continues to be the point of the spear. Essentially, I call them our strike force. They're our Delta force in our enrollment management and what we do. We continue to get poached, which is okay with me. It's a point of pride that I'm essentially the regional leadership development center now for outreach staff as they get poached and pulled over to other colleges, including Glendale and Norco as of the latest that stole some folks. But out of that, we continue to look at dual enrollment. We did have quite a bit of loss in dual enrollment. Our outreach team, we actually put dual enrollment in outreach, so they're all housed together. Outreach, recruitment, and dual enrollment is together in one unit. Our biggest thing there is to try to recoup some of the loss that happened. We did a lot of things like combining high schools during the pandemic, but now as we begin to separate those out and re-engage those so that we can actually have full sections, that's a big goal. We had a goal of 1,000 promised students prior to the pandemic hitting, and we were on track to hit that. Of course, that got obliterated as soon as the March 2020 happened. That is still a goal. We do not anticipate hitting 1,000 promised students because we've not been in the high schools since everything was remote. But that 1,000 basically floor, if you will, it's not a ceiling, it's a floor, is a goal for fall of 2022. And we anticipate once we can get back in the class in the high schools to be able to do that. High touch, Dr. Rahman spoke about this. We are incorporating much more high touch as part of our outreach. This was really a flaw that happened. We ran out of money in our mail account, so we couldn't mail packets. And so it was going to take a few weeks to get all that done. So we said, just put them in cars and send them out. It was actually more effective to actually hand deliver packets, because we also got a bunch of additional social media, people hashtagging, taking pictures, parents out there. It was pretty cool. So we'll continue to do some high touch because it was actually more effective than sending mail envelopes. Targeted outreach, we will continue to do that. Very specific, sending messages like, we noticed that you still need an English class. Here are 5 English classes we think that would fit within your schedule. Or we see that you're 2 classes short of getting the certificate. Here's the classes, here's when they're offered. When we do that, we also include with them someone to call. So we usually include, you have an appointment with Tanya tomorrow at 3 p.m. If you can't make this, click this number to change it. And Tanya is there waiting for them when they show up. So that's been very effective. We'll continue to do that. Our focus through the pandemic was on head count. We shifted away from enrollment and just went with a pure head count. Focus on getting them in and keeping them. If they can't do 12 units, for the love of God, have them do 2 units or 3 units. Just keep them engaged, because if they disengage from the institution, they'll disengage forever. So that was primary, and we found out that the enrollment followed, and we just focused on the head count. So that was our primary thing that we did. We will now shift away from that, not away, but we'll continue to focus on head count. We'll pull more of the enrollment piece in as well. And with that, re-engaging with our maps, our 2-year schedules, trying to get students back to a full-time commitment or as much as possible in order to complete their programs in 2 years or less and move them on to transfer or on to career. We continue to tighten up the scheduling around the 2-year completion agenda. It maintains a specific agenda of mine and the president's on the campus, which has increased our completion and success, and we've seen those numbers continue to go up year over year. We anticipate that the evening programs are gonna essentially almost be dead coming out of this, and so I don't think our evening programs coming back from pandemic is gonna be nearly as strong as they were before, which means we are anticipating a shift truly to an online academy for our evening program. My goal is to actually put Calbright out of business. I think we can do that. There's no need for them. And so we're gonna find that we're gonna see a lot more of online academy for our adult learners specifically who attended in the evening. And so that's a major shift that we're doing. We will continue to monitor shifting enrollment patterns. We did see that students began to enroll much later. It was actually worrisome this last spring of 2021. I had to have my department chairs hold off from canceling classes. I said, we saw the patterns are shifting, just wait. And so we went into the first day of the semester with courses that had 10, 11 students enrolled. And I'm glad we did, because had we canceled those, we wouldn't have had seats to put all the students who enrolled on day 1, day 2, and day 3 of the semester. So we've got to continue to monitor that shift and see where those students, that enrollment pattern is going, because it certainly shifted during the pandemic. Now, whether it shifts back, I'm not sure. It looks like this fall it's holding and students are going to hang on and enroll a little bit later. So it's a little bit of a gamble, but we've got to take a look at that and do that game. We have continued to play the hot hands. We saw our modern languages explode. And so we continue to play hot hands like business, modern languages, those areas just exploded with enrollment. And so we continue to invest in there. We do know that we're going to have to do some shifting in human capital in certain areas, such as with Area F. We're going to hire a new full-time faculty member for ethnic studies. We know that that's got to grow, likely to grow as big as almost communication studies as far as the number of courses we're going to need. At the same time, Area D is going to have to decrease. We're not going to be able to be heavy in there. So that's a significant conversation that's happening on the campus, and a major point of enrollment management is that Area D to Area F shift and how that's going to work. It is happening. We've got a new chair over that area who is ready for the challenges that are going to take place, as well as the dean and myself to do that. VDK and the thing, write-up that Mary wrote, she talked about us being back in VDK. It was mentioned earlier. We do need to get a lot of non-credit in there. That's where a lot of our growth is going to come back in. Non-credit took a significant hit. We'll also be bringing extension in there. On the credit side, we're looking at really programming post-pandemic that we're going to see. Commoditized labor is decreasing before the pandemic. Commoditized labor is now accelerating in the decrease. We know that AI and autonomous systems are what's going to replace that, and we've got to be prepared for that. So we're looking at some high energy STEM programs around that area that we could potentially grow at VDK. And then of course the LA Health Alliance that Mary mentioned, and trying to take the Alliance High School and moving that into a true middle college program. And last, just remaining very, very fluid through this time and looking at the enrollment daily to determine whether or not we need to convert something from in-person to online or vice versa.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Next, let's jump over to LA Trade Tech, and I believe we have Harry. Harry, I always get your last name wrong. Is that Ziogas? Zygas? Ziogas. I got it right the first time.
Yeah, Dr. Vanwood, yes, you did. Dr. Vanwood is out on vacation, well-earned vacation, first one since I think she started over a year and a half ago. And at Trade Tech, we're experiencing a drop in enrollment way before the pandemic has started. So what the pandemic did is actually made it more difficult for us, and it escalated that decline. So a year and a half ago, the college at the same time was going through a lot of change in the senior and executive leadership team. So in the beginning of the pandemic, what we did is, first of all, we decided when we wanted the classes, any class that we could bring back, we did bring back. We had more classes and more students than any other college in the district. And that was part of maintaining as much enrollment as possible, because we saw our numbers coming down dramatically because our CTE classes, our students could not come in. A student will not learn online how to fix a diesel engine. So they just dropped and they never came back. So our plan right now is to actually reestablish that connection with our students through a student enrollment management plan that will establish and build systems and infrastructure to have a sustainable enrollment. We can do that. We're planning to do that with effective marketing outreach and engaging our students, make sure we do whatever it takes to retain our students, focusing on dual enrollment with LAUSD, our main school partner, and focusing also on concurrent enrollment. More specifically, we're currently working on phone banking, a plan if it's necessary to actually go and knocking on doors, advertising, and using any possible other sources of advertising that we can imagine to bring more students in, create those leads, and make sure we convert those leads to enrollment. That means we need to create the infrastructure and using human capital. We don't have an outreach coordinator, and our student services department has been, I think they only have one employee currently at staff. So even though we're trying to right-size the operation, not having that human capital to follow up to those leads to make them enrollments won't help us. What else are we doing? We're trying to stabilize and build systems and infrastructures for sustainable enrollment. We have created over the last year and a half a sizable fund balance, approximately of $8 million. Our main goal is to use these funds to actually build our enrollment. It went down from 12,600 approximately the year we're being held harmless down to 9,000. So we have a lot of work to do. At the same time, through professional development, we're trying to train our people, our employees, in reference to enrollment. Currently, we are sending to what is being called a Summer Enrollment Management Academy, facilitated by UC San Diego, 10 of our executives and senior staff. And the goal is for them to learn from others and then come to the campus and be the teachers and the trainers of the other departments. An example will be, we're going to have a full participation in this regard. An example will be that our Academic Affairs Department, along with the Faculty Guild and Academic Senate, are developing an academy to train our faculty in scheduling and strategic enrollment management. Now, it's going to be difficult to get to that number. So when we're building our fiscal plans, we have multiple what-if scenarios. And because we do understand we have a demographic issue with LAUSD, we have 20% less students. So to get to the number of 12,700, the whole harmless number is going to be very difficult. In combination of right-sizing the operation and bring as many as enrollments as possible, we're also trying to find new ideas of getting new programs in. We're trying to take advantage of our culinary program by having a major in a food truck. We're going to actually having one purchasing one, procuring one, in order to attract more students to that program, because there is a lot of interest. Also in the other areas, there is an opportunity to actually have our auto program, the opportunity to have a major, let's say, in electric cars. There's a big demand in Southern California, as we have a lot of companies. We're actually setting a shop, and there's demand for technicians to actually service those electric vehicles, and TradeTech is actually positioned in that area more than any of our schools. Bottom line is we're rebuilding our operation, we're building our infrastructure, we're using our resources as our base to enhance our enrollment. And if you have any questions, please go ahead and ask in the end of this.
Okay, thank you. Chancellor, let's jump over to, you're going to be doing the quick update for Southwest College. So let's do that. Colleagues, we're right at 11 o'clock, so we'll take a 5-minute break. I do know I've gotten some hands that are raised. I don't recognize the names immediately, but we'll have a chance for a little public comment at the end. But colleagues, after the 5-minute break, we're going to come back, be ready for your questions and dialogues. We're going to get a chance to all raise them at that point. So Chancellor, real quick on Southwest College.
Yes.
Chair Bettis, could I just say one point? You're absolutely right, and members of the public, you've already opened up the public comment portion. This is a regular meeting. I would just notify members of the public, if the chair and the board choose to take other comments, they can do it at the end of the meeting. I just wanted to put that point out there, that you'd already opened up the public comment period, and folks can wait until the end of the meeting when the chair does allow the public to speak.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Prieto. I'm happy to report on behalf of Dr. Juana. She is out of state on a family vacation as well. But a couple of things. The right sizing discussion really began in many ways with LA Southwest College about 2 years ago, when the board asked me to take a very close look at the college as it was declining in enrollments and having some very long-standing structural fiscal issues. So with the board's concurrence, we brought in additional resources, a team to look at LA Southwest College and provide a report which they are following to the letter. In addition to that, Dr. Juan has additional support in coaching and executive support so that she can move and build the college infrastructure there. So with that in mind, the pages 23 and 24 of the supplemental materials gives a lot more detail as to what's going on at LA Southwest College. But I would simply highlight that the college will become smaller before it gets stronger. One of the findings that the report had is that it did not have complete programs that students could finish. So indeed, students weren't attending and consistently because they could not complete their academic program. So you're going to see a fewer amount of programs and completion over time. So this a normal decline that you see now is not unexpected, but they are nonetheless going out with a series of robust activities as outlined in pages 23 and 24, including the high touch environments that you will see. As you will note, the LA Southwest College, the surrounding area, is amongst probably the first or second lowest income environment that the LACCD service area. So because of that, LASC focuses a lot on student support services, on ensuring that they have access to health, access to vaccines, access to food, access to other kinds of emergency aid, so that the families and students that are in those areas can have the support systems in place so that they can indeed go to school. They're involved with some intense calling, texting, emailing. You've seen the marketing materials that they have to really reintroduce the college to so many of the community members there. They're bolstering their K-12 partnerships. And as you know, the community takes a special interest in LA Southwest College down in the South LA area. So they're maximizing that opportunity to build partnerships, to strengthen the relationships that they have with the middle school that is there, middle college opportunity that's there, with the other charter school that is there as well for dual enrollment purposes. So you will see Dr. Juan and her team be very energetic. They have an increasing number of on-campus personnel because they know, like was mentioned, I think at LA Mission College, students are demanding in-person support and services. So you will see that bolstered as well. So again, refer to pages 23 and 24 for a more thorough report, but happy to add a few highlights, Mr. Bettis.
Sounds good. Thank you, Chancellor, for that. So we've gotten through a brief presentation from all our colleges. We're 11:04 right now, colleagues. We're going to take a 5-minute stretch legs break here, and we'll report back at 11:10 on the dot. We have approximately 25 minutes allocated to our discussion on enrollment, 20 or so for learning loss, and about 15 for staffing. I will play it by ear, colleagues, if we go a little bit after that. And of course, this is mid-year. So based on these dialogues and your thoughts and your comments, obviously these are continuing dialogues, not just here and over, but long-term continuing. But let's take 5 now, and we'll be back at 11:10 on the dot.
I got it. You got it.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Let me go back to just a quick roll call, make sure all the trustees are here. So I see Trustee Hoffman, I see Trustee Henderson. Trustee Vella did join us in the last meeting, so I should note that. Trustee Vella, are we back from our break here? Let's see if you can acknowledge that. Trustee Fang, do I still see you? Are you around? I think Trustee Fang may have dropped off. Trustee Buelna. Trustee Moreno.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so we do have our quorum again by visual and voice. Want to give a quick moment for Trustee Buelna. Vella, I think Vella, you came off of mute, so I think you're live and in person.
Yeah, I'm here.
Perfect, thank you. And I believe we might have missed Fong. I know Fong was, he had a competing commitment, so I think he was going to be on as long as he could. So Trustee Buelna, are you back on? Trustee Buelna. Okay, I'll shoot him a quick note that we're starting. And what I'd like to do, trustees, is I'd like to kick off this focused discussion now on enrollment. And part of this, and so what we'd like to get is your comments, your thoughts, feedback, questions potentially on the things that were presented to us, things you like, things you don't, etc. There's as we go through this exchange, the idea is to try to create a framework for us to continue the dialogue, since this is a core function of the district. But we want to start off with getting some of the data, seeing where we stand now. We're entering the fall enrollment period. And it's important to have this feedback here. So let me do this. I'm gonna kick it off with of Trustee Hoffman or Trustee Buelna. I see you're logged on now, but let's go Trustee Hoffman first. Trustee Buelna, we'll go right after that. And if we can take 4 to 5 minutes each to start, and then we'll exchange as much as we can. And colleagues, we'll adjust the time based on sort of the core interests that we have here. So. And I will indicate, I know that every once in a while we get looks like a member of the public come in and raising hands. We've done a public comment period. We will attempt to provide another period at the end of this dialogue. But right now, this is a trustee portion of the agenda to provide comments and feedback. So Trustee Hoffman and then Trustee Buelna right after.
Thank you, President Veras, and thank you all so much for the presentation. I think for me, what's really helpful are the college presidents that actually reported out on real numbers and data. And I think we need to let the data be our guide when we look at enrollment. What I also would like to see is if we could create some kind of a dashboard, and Dr. Corner, maybe you could help with this, to find out why students dropped or didn't persist. Was it for academic reasons, or was it for personal reasons in terms of basic need and financial? So I think that would be really helpful as we look at how to increase enrollment. For the very first time, and I can honestly say this, for the very first time in my 24-year career working at a community college and now being on the board for the past 6 years, I actually am a little bit worried about enrollment decline, and not just for our district, but statewide. And what does that mean for our system? And we need to be more creative in terms of outreach and recruitment. When we talk about those adults coming back, the adults, and Noah, you referred to them as well. I don't think we're necessarily talking about basic adult education. We should outreach to adults that either never came to college in the first place, went straight into the workforce, and offer them the same kind of programs and services as we are for our high school seniors, right? And so coming up with creative ways to tap into that population. I think adult education is very important also, and non-credit education, and, you know, skills training, and what Dr. Grubbins talked about, creating more short-term kinds of cooperative work experience programs that lead to immediate jobs, the Manufacturing Academy, the program that we have with bus drivers with Metro. But I also think we need to reach out into that untapped population, and I think it's 35% of Californians between the ages of 25 and 54 do not have a college degree. And we need to find out who are these people living in our district and bring them back. And it might just be, hey, come take one class. Hey, come take one class for free. Let's figure out how to do that. But I really appreciate the report. I do want to see more data. The narrative is great, but I think we need to let the data be our guide and figure out how to increase our enrollment, because, you know, not to sound like Trustee Moreno, but I'm very, very worried. And this is for the very first time. When I looked at our FTS, you know, at the high was 107, and now we're down to what, 85? That's concerning. And yes, it's pandemic, but I really didn't expect this. I kind of expected a surge, kind like we had in 2008, you know, in the Great Recession, when students were banging on our doors and we had to turn them away. And so thank you for your reports.
Okay, thank you, Trustee. Trustee Wellna.
Sorry, I was muted. I couldn't get the scroll thing around. Thank you very much. Did you say we have 5 minutes each, Trustee Bettis?
Yes.
Okay, I won't take that one. Well, maybe. One, I appreciate Trustee Hoffman saying we're all going to be our own Trustee Morenos kind of today. You know, so I think Trustee Moreno knows what we're talking about. You know, in having the discussion about enrollment, it's on every single IESS agenda, because where we're at today isn't necessarily that unpredictable, because we've been looking at the data, you know. So, you know, do we necessarily, and I'm not disagreeing with Trustee Hamid, you always need more data. But at this point, as trustees, we have to figure out, look, what is occurring as an institution? We represent the institutions. So, you know, and what's happening, you know, I remember in January of 2017, we asked for enrollment plans. These have been the best enrollment plans that we've ever, or the presentations that we've really ever had. And I really thank the presidents and the presidents who sent the vice presidents who couldn't be here, and were respectful enough to actually make the presentations. We really, really appreciate that. But we also have to figure out, as an institution, is our cheese being moved? Has it been moved? Is it being moved? And what do we do in order to get to that other place where potentially we are at? You know, so I heard a few things that, as an institution, we have 100% control over what decisions we make. We can make decisions if we see certain strategic issues and problems arising. There was a few of the presidents said, in person, we understand that there is a pandemic. We understand protecting everyone's health, everyone's rights, absolutely. But what we also have been hearing is that students, a lot of students are having a lot of problems with online. And well, I'll get to the online component right now. So what decisions are we making today on July 17, 2021 to help that process? Because every process that we have is a human process. And if we can't do anything today to affect that process right now, what decisions need to be done? Because a lot of time bureaucracies kind of feed themselves and say, oh, there's a problem, let's put in the evaluation from a year from now. That's a bad thing. And if there's something that can be done, then we should absolutely change it. And that's one message. We heard very clearly from Interim President Aguilar, the waiting list at 5. Is that an issue that can be changed now? Not in a year, not for a future evaluation, not for data. Can it be changed now? And I think A frustration as a trustee is that we hear some of these things and then we hear, some national data. National data is 10% off, where some of our colleges are at around that, but half of them are not. So what do we need to do? Some of those macro strategies to lay that out. I've had conversations with some folks throughout the district. No one has mentioned, or I think one person mentioned the website. I'm having a lot of folks communicate with me that they cannot figure out how to apply. Some folks have mentioned to me, and I still don't know what the acronym means, SCR, that's an issue, right? Why is it an issue for our students to have a problem applying into the district? I've seen East LA's, I get their text messages. I see that we're probably doing some of the best marketing we've done since I've been around at the district. The question is, as we're getting the students, are they getting enrolled? Are they giving up in that process? And if we can do something right now from our centralized IT components that we have spent millions of dollars to get up and going, honestly, as a trustee, I don't need to hear any excuse about why students can't apply. It should be that you shouldn't have to write a memo to our IT folks to get those websites actually functioning. So if that's not happening, that's a grave disappointment as a trustee. And if the application process is too complex, then let's fix it. Again, we don't need any additional data. We don't need a PowerPoint presentation to get some of this stuff done. I've also been, folks have said, as a district, we're not doing multi-year district-wide enrollment planning and budgeting. Should we be doing that as a district? Are these some strategic issues? Again, very strategic. Everything everyone mentioned sounds awesome. Awesome, and Trustee Vettis, you give me a 30-second. Awesome. However, we also need feedback from you as to where we can improve as a district to make your life easier. So as you have 1,000 students lining up outside, are we doing the best to get them actually enrolled? If they're not understanding something, how are we helping that process? But the fact that the waiting lists are at 5, and I heard from interim President Aguilar, who has been with the district forever and a day, and I mean that positive. And if that's a major issue, then can we fix that by Monday? I don't know, but can we? Right? Why should we be waiting at all for some of this stuff that should be able to be fixed with a click or two? And if IT can't fix it, then that's a bigger conversation with IT. In-person component, I already spoke about that. So these are, again, looking at it as my biggest concern is it seems like, I think we heard from, 8 presidents and vice presidents that everyone is doing what they should be doing in terms of their job from a tactician perspective, the outreach component, the communicating. The question is, as a district, are we all doing our job in making those tactics happen? And that's where I think the potential disconnect is occurring. Trustee Vettis, did I stay within the 5? You're muted.
I said you were close, but this is the end point. So let me take it there. Let me jump over to let's go to Trustee Vela. We'll go to Trustee Moreno after, and then Trustee Henderson. Trustee Vela, you're on mute.
Okay, another one, right? So look, it's interesting, right? Like, let's take advantage of our multi-college district, right? I just got an email that said, hey, you got accepted at East LA College and the rest of our 8 colleges, right? No, that's not happening, but it should, right? We should be able to get that email that says, hey, welcome to LACCD. And by the way, you're admitted to all of our 9 colleges, and let's leverage that, right? So right now is the time, right? We've been in a pandemic. Let's be honest here, the LA Times has never been nice to us. We've got a lot stacked against us. But if we leverage all of this, our resources, our fabulous faculty, our presidents, someone said, it takes money to make money. Well, guess what? Right now we have the money. So what I want to do is tell each of our college presidents, number one, thank you so much for all of the outreach and all that you've done. And this is a time to put that money to use. This is a time to get innovative, outside the box, ensure that we're outreaching, not just the traditional outreach. And, I respect that, Trustee Moreno and people who really have built up the district and enrollment due to word of mouth and getting to high schools. Look, I was there, I was a K-12 board member. I did dual enrollment with Trustee Moreno at Montebello Unified School District, and it worked fantastic. But are we really outreaching to the people we need to outreach to, right? And how are we going to do that? And I think for me, it's time that we kind of put that aside, and really put some resources into dynamic and thinking outside of the box marketing and outreach efforts. Now, I don't know what it's going to look like. I think each college president has their own idea. I loved all of the ideas that you guys are bringing to the table. But, and I think, last week I texted both President Vettis and the Chancellor and, East LA College President Roman. I got a mailer from Rio Hondo and Montebello, and they're trying to get me. and that's not cool, right? And so are we sending mailers? Are we, doing the best thing we can? And I get it. I know we want to be fiscally prudent, and I trust, our chancellor and our CFO to be able to do that. And I think we can do that, as well as putting some more resources into getting folks aware of us, and dispelling these, at least in my view, stories that, have been circulating around that, we might not be as top notch as the college next to us. That's not really the case. We are top notch. And if anything, I think we've been improving steadily statewide. And I think the accolades are coming from the state in the way that we capture funds for our district, the way that, our College Promise program has been fantastic. And so I think there's so much that we can do and we can continue to do. So for me, yes, I could have been like, hey, we should do this, we should do that. But I just want to thank all the college presidents for being here and telling you have my full support. And, I think really investing in a non-traditional way is going to be, I'm going to be looking at that. I know I'm big on social media, and I think, I wasn't until recently. And so to me, I think it's going to be important. I think we have a chance to really have a paradigm shift at LACCD. And so I'm excited to see what else we're going to do, and, stay tuned, right? Thank you all.
Okay, thank you, Trustee. Next, let's go over to Trustee Moreno.
Am I second to last or last?
No, you're third to last.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was
You're in the
deferring.
middle.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't want to ring the alarm as it should be ringed or rung. But, a lot of our enrollment is dependent upon such things as dual enrollment. And that's not a good place to be. Ultimately, and very candidly, I don't know why we don't say this, but we shouldn't be compared to anybody in the United States. We have some of the greatest underserved population anywhere. So any statistic that has us declining has to be magnified in light of the fact of our ability in our service area is really underserved by us. So I know we talked about persistence rates, and I'm not clear what all that means in terms of real numbers. I know that a lot of the work I've heard presented to us, a lot of it's been done before, and I don't want to degrade the emotion and the interest in getting things done. However, there are fundamental problems. We talk about in our district so frequently about serving minority students, yet we when it comes down to the real work about that, we don't follow through. What we do is we need to understand that more than 60% of our student population are underprepared students. I don't know what the percent, even greater than that. Yet we ask them, and I'd like to know why our colleges, who are now involved in telephone banking, while it's impossible to get somebody to respond to a telephone call when you're working on your website, they're trying to get in the class, why somebody can't be there to answer some questions. There's some really simple strategic things we need to do. It's a mindset change. We're dealing with students who are vulnerable or insecure about their future. We need to be aware that the more complex we make our enrollment process, the less likely we'll be able to attract those same students and keep them. We are killing ourselves in the process. I attempted to enroll in one of our colleges, and I found that just on the screen, locating where to go was very difficult. Number one. Number two, the way we distribute the schedule in such a way, should you leave that screen and go to the schedule and go back again, that's almost impossible. There's so many things wrong with what we have. I attempted to enroll at Santa Monica College and I got in fairly easily. But so we are shooting ourselves in the foot, so to speak. And I know that many of the colleges are working very hard. However, it's really a full court press. It's more than just the admissions people. It's more than the student services side. It's the entire college, from custodians to clerical people. So the bottom line is that we need to get people back in class. I believe our student population, as witnessed by the declining enrollment relative to online classes, that our students are much more benefited by in-person instruction. And I dare to say, keeping a young person who's dropped out of class in high school, it's 50% dropout rates at some of our schools, that we have to be prepared to gather all those students and give them a second chance. We're failing to do that. And I think there's no solace in this idea that somehow we're preserved from some form of economic reprisal right now. The bigger the debt we create in enrollment, the more difficult it will be for us to address when we're called upon to catch up. And so it is a critical time, probably more critical than any time before. And I, for one, having been in the system for 50 years, I'm kind of concerned about being a member of the board that happens to oversee the largest decline in the history of the district, something that I would never anticipate doing. However, we do have responsibility, and I don't believe we're fulfilling it. Of course, if there's any more need for details about enrollment, I'm willing to discuss that with the appropriate authorities. Thank you.
Okay, Trustee Henderson.
Thank you, President Veras. I will start with kudos, and I want to commend the colleges that are enacting plans that provide some really hands-on personal outreach to the students, making phone calls. That is really huge. We talk about meeting our students where they are. We email and we text because they text, and that is how they primarily communicate, and on Messenger and social media. But those phone calls are what really will help to bring those students back. However, it works best for them. So in that vein, I commend those of the colleges that are offering hybrid options and continued online classes, because not all of our students want to come back and in person. And we also have to admit that some of the reason that we have lost students and probably won't get those students back is because many of our the classes that these students enrolled in, their teachers weren't present, and they didn't feel that they were getting the most bang for their buck when they enrolled. So we need to be honest about that also, and making sure that as we are reducing course offerings, that we're not reducing offerings of courses that students need, that we're only getting rid of courses that they're traditionally not enrolling in. And I agree with Trustee Hoffman that we need some data. So I would also love to see the data on how effective some of these outreach plans are throughout the fall semester, and how and if the colleges are adapting to the data, the information that they gain based, and then apply that in the spring and the summer. So again, thank you for the reports. Some were a little lacking in numbers and specifics. And those of you that were very thorough in terms of what you were doing, how you were doing it, kudos to you. And I hope that perhaps those presidents that have been able to provide information specifics could perhaps work with some of the colleges that gave less than robust reports, because if we're all in the business of supporting our students and making sure that all of our students have successful outcomes, then we should be collaborating a little more. Thank you, President.
Thank you, Trustee. I wanted to offer a few comments from my perspective here as well. You know, I think we began this conversation and made the comment a little earlier that over the years, I've had a chance to see a number of outreach plans, and a number that were quite good, some that lacked, and it always begged the question why we come back. I mean, why we come back to outreach and why we come back to this conversation. And although we had a little sort of bump forward, enrollment is essentially how we generate revenue for these colleges. Even though we've changed our formula a little bit, even though we've had the state hold us harmless because of formula changes, because of we're in the hold harmless category now because of COVID. The reality, and I appreciate, I think at least 2 college presidents acknowledged this in their presentation, that implementation was a challenge. And certainly there hasn't been strong consequences to not being able to fully implement or to even understand the level of implementation that's taken place. At times we've had executive changes, so the continuity question has been there. But I will say this, and I know we have a few interims on the screen here. One of the things that the board sort of indicated is, although interim, there's continuity. You are connected to this district and the things that have been talked about. So there's a lot of familiarity, and I appreciate the Armida's experience from East going to Mission, Ada's experience from West going to Pierce, and Luis certainly is continuing as our 3 interims here. You know, it also comes with a wealth of connection to this district. So this continuity question, where perhaps a plan was put in place, implementation was not strong or well designed, and then it sort of gets tucked away in a drawer and moved on. And some of that happens because of discontinuity. We, are in a place where everybody here, if not in their new position for 17 days or 20 days or whatever, have been with us for years and know us and sort of understand the expectations. So the hope is to be able to, adapt and keep it going and running, and be able to see these plans as important ones to implement. I heard a blend of like new strategies and old school strategies. I guess I'll call it old school. Picking up the phone I take as old school, and that's good. And I think that's important, because I think it's a sort of a recognition that there's nothing like a human touch. And if it's in a hustle, and I hear sort of the all points bulletin style of get everybody engaged, get staff and faculty engaged, to make it all be part of this outreach effort. Those are important things that I heard, and I think they're valuable things for me. But also heard a number of concerns expressed about structural problems. And I think important in our conversation is how we're not having this conversation about structural problems anymore. Because structural problems appear to be, maybe it's mysterious, because we don't know how to, a website goes, or how much data we're asking for, or how long stuff is taking. But we're dealing with a generation of students who get a chance to order their food in an instant, order their products in an instant. Sometimes they can probably have it show up to their doorstep within 2 hours. It's a very instant world, and we're not that instant. There's examples that I've heard where if people don't do well in an exam, They get a chance to have, student support services contact them and be there in an instant. So those kinds of things in terms of the experience are really valuable. But I do want to make sure that that the structural things that I'm hearing about are things that don't lag, that can just get managed and dealt with, quickly and effectively. And if there's cost to be associated to it, then it needs to be planned out and mapped out quickly, because there's just no reason for structural issues to be lingering. If there's structural issues that relate to some of the way that we've organized our workforce, some of the ways we've organized hours, I've heard of some strategies here mentioned by a few presidents of engaging with the workforce and trying to make the modifications. Those are all real things. And sometimes at the board level, when we are in our CBA process, it's valuable to get the feedback in the process of what's happening, to be able to understand that we can work together with labor partners to adjust and get things right. Because I think they all realize as much as we do that the enrollment is essentially the lifeblood of our budget here. So I think that is important to continue forward. Trustee Moreno brought up the lack of preparedness. I think I've seen a couple of you colleagues post things even in this dialogue about mandatory vaccination we've been having over the past few weeks, and listening to the UC announcement just a couple of days ago. We have, whereas UC is a top 12.5% institution, and there's a line of students around the corner to enter those schools. We, on the other hand, are to the student population that's not prepared. We are sort of doing civil society kind of servicing, trying to make sure that people have career directions, but at the same time we're trying to uplift essentially the people of California by the services that we provide and offer. But that also begs us to question the relevancy of our services, the relevancy of the products that we have here, of the learning that we've prioritized, to ensure that it's still relevant to people. There's plenty of, there's on the lower end job market, and we hear about this constantly, there is way more jobs available than people applying to them. We have conditions where, I'm going to use childcare as an example. And we've had this dialogue in the past where people are enrolled in our childcare programs. They come out to a job that's not making them much more money than sort of, the wages that they can earn without a degree. And although it's a calling, those are the kinds of conversations that we need to dig deeper into is what we're asking for and what we're doing. Is it appropriate? And is it relevant? And is it, what kinds of things should we be prioritizing better? But more than that, I think it's this kind of striving to new. What is the new going to be? President Limbaugh, I appreciate the fact that you indicated at West LA, it used to be the place that people would go take an online class because you guys used to have more than the others. The reality is that, we went from West being the leader at 30 some odd % of remote learning to everybody being at some 95 odd %. So they can go anywhere. It's actually some of the same challenges that Calbright is encountered statewide, of trying to be an online college when this pandemic forced everyone to be an online college immediately. And I think, it's impacted our workforces and it's impacted the way we do business. But I think in the future, and I'll pinpoint Jim Lancaster over at City and the things that are part of Mayor Gallagher's report. I very much appreciate it. And I think looking at the numbers through the years, certainly, there's things that I think you're doing at City that's very positive, but I also want to balance that from sort of the in-person effort, whereas some of those haven't been as aggressive as some of our other schools. So we're balancing the aggressiveness of those that are trying to do the in-person, certainly workforce development, certainly the other, pieces that are necessary that students adapt to and connect to. We're really in a window where if there was any time that a hold harmless scenario is important, is probably this fall, of where we're in between in person, dealing with the enrollment issues, dealing with sort of the economy as it stands, and just trying to understand what we get right. I've dialogued with the chancellor offline on this. It's like, what is our new number? Is it going to be 65% in person and 35% remote? Or is it going to be something 50? We were shooting for 50-50. certainly by the numbers that are on the table, we're not at 50, and we won't be at 50. But what is the expectation post-COVID of an in-person experience? What is the enrollment expectation backward and forward? I think, some of us have been on this dialogue about enrollment as a number in comparison to, there's been times when these districts are, a couple 100,000 students enrolling from everything from classes that don't count anymore for college, credit. But we've had enrollment, it's an ongoing thing because of the way we're funded, but things are changing. We have to balance out that conversation along with the other conversation of what is this pandemic done to us and will do to us in the future, what we look like. I'm just throwing out different ideas. I'm not necessarily espousing one or the other, but these are the sort of serious confrontations ahead of us. Now, I don't know if my words prompted this or there's other things that I got two hands up. So let me say this, colleagues, we're at 11:48. I would like to do this. I think this conversation deserves a little bit more time. So if it's okay with everybody, if we can continue on enrollment, I'll work with the chancellor in terms of the focus conversation of perhaps one of our board study sessions that we can do that can get to the learning loss, that can get to the other two items that are here, because certainly there's a lot more that can be brought on here. But if there's no objections, and I'll leave it, I see Wellness and Vella's hand. If you want to comment, if that's okay, we can just stay on the enrollment.
Only 30 seconds, I swear. It's not even.
Yeah, we're still running out of time. So we'll let me do the two here. And then if we want to open the learning loss a little bit, then we can do that. If not, then we'll make it a plan to continue it into a regular study session meeting. So Trustee Vella, let me jump to you, and then Trustee Buona behind you. And if there's any other trustees that want to follow up with a secondary comment.
Thank you, President Vettis, and well said. I agree with everything you said. Look, for me also, one of the interesting things is as we venture out into tackling housing and food insecurity, I think that's going to be a big issue in enrollment. And I really think that the innovative programs that each college can do and is, on their way to doing is going to help get some of our students back into the college. Thank you.
Trustee Buona?
Yes. So the one thing that I agree with Noah Brown is that we as trustees, we're fiduciaries. And that means that we're in charge of the district. That's the structure of the district. Our bosses are the voters that can either fire us or not fire us. What I've gotten from us today is that we know enrollment's down. We actually didn't even need a presentation on that. We know that. The question is our enrollment artificially down because of actions that we're not taking that we know we could do right now? There's some things that some of the presidents and some of the vice presidents have stated in this presentation that our administration can change now. They can make certain administrative decisions. And so my recommendation to us as a trustee and as a recommendation to the chancellor is, can we figure out what are some of those immediate changes that have been identified that could be immediately reformed, immediately, as in right now, be changed in order for our enrollment number that is down. We all know it's down. Again, we don't need that data, but to take away those artificial barriers to enrollment, like the waiting list, like the issues related to the website, so we can get to a real number. Because if we're arguing about, and not arguing about, we're discussing enrollment, but some of those things can be fixed, it's a lost opportunity. And that's what I'm concerned about, Trustee Vettis, is that there's certain things right now that could be fixed that aren't being fixed for no reason, so that when we spend time doing a study session, we can study things that will take longer, like a multi-year plan. That's something, for a multi-year, right? But why we're not doing certain things right now as a district, I'm confused about that.
Okay. Chancellor, did you want to, in terms of that small piece, and I mentioned that as a structural piece, and I think Trustee Bona is scoring it again. Do you want to provide a brief response? And if this is something that needs more time later, we'll do that more time later. And then Hoffman, I see your hand up there too. So
yes, thank you, Mr. Vettis. On the discussion of waitlist, Dr. Wallin and trustees, that is a local decision. We've negotiated a class size environment, and waitlist is indeed a local decision. I think you heard President Aguiar mention the self-induced barriers. That's a Pierce College self-induced barrier to have 5 on the waiting list. You don't see that at the other colleges because that's a discussion between the vice president of instruction, the president, the deans, department chairs, et cetera. And that's something that I think you're going to hear and see President Aguiar discuss, negotiate with her Pierce College colleagues, who I'm sure are interested in making remediation there. So that is a very specific example that is specific to the college, but it is something that isn't within the parameters of what they call reasonable limits or reasonable class sizes. So that's a local decision. So that can be remediated with local discussion.
Thank you, Chancellor. Trustee Hoffman.
Thank you. And I really appreciate this conversation, and no, I appreciate your reminding us about our fiduciary responsibilities and the fact that we have a duty of care. I do think some of the conversation we're having is a little bit in the weeds. So thank you, Chancellor, for bringing up the fact that that's, local to each college in terms of the wait list. And that's probably something you can take up at your, cabinet meetings with your presidents. I would like to have a broader discussion about enrollment management. So maybe we can schedule another study session. And also what I think is lacking is sort of the plans for a safe return to campus with in-person and remote services and what that actually looks like, because I'm getting a lot of questions, from potential students saying, well, can I schedule all of my classes in person? Can I do a combination of remote and in person? And then are we going to have areas where students who might be student workers physically on campus, but they're taking their courses remotely? Are they going to be able, is there an area, are we doing anything like construction wise to think about students who might need to Zoom in a private setting to either meet with a counselor or take a class while they're actually on campus because they have other duties to attend to on campus? So I guess as we move into this new environment and the new normal, I would like to see more specific and concrete plans. That I know that's a lot to ask, because I know, we're all sort of figuring out how do we come back. But when you think about bringing your classified staff back on campus, how are the students that are used to remote services? And Chancellor, you and I were at that town hall where there were students who said, I want to continue. I'm nervous that you're not going to let me continue remotely. How are those students going to be served? So I think we have when we talk about enrollment management, we have a much bigger conversation to have. And let's not forget about retention. I think retention services, I think every single campus should have not only, an outreach office, but also a student success center focused solely on retention. There's just a couple thoughts off the top of my head.
Sure,
for the future.
Trustee Bona, you had an additional comment, or is that?
Yeah. So the point isn't to get. I don't need a response on the immediate stuff right now, right? But the website situation, there are some district stuff that we need to know. It would be helpful to know from the chancellor and I don't need to know that right now. What are some of those steps that can be that the presidents or vice presidents could identify that are not long-term, that are low-hanging fruit? And again, I don't need that reply right now. We know, and I've almost heard it from every single campus, that accessing the website by students is very, very difficult. And if there are some things that could be done relatively soon to fix that, why wouldn't we do that and not need to wait all the way until August in order to get that done? Again, I was specifically told whatever SCR is, right? In terms of those issues. So this isn't about getting into the weeds. This is simply identifying what is obvious and in front of us. I'll leave it there.
Okay. let's do the trustee. That's probably going to require a follow-up. So let me do this. I want to have. I know there was a few members of the public that were interested in making comments. I'm going to open it up. We'll try to do. Since we're lacking time, colleagues, if you can bear with, we can open it up for 1 minute in terms of a public comment, and then we'll have a final concluding comment from the chancellor and from Noah, and then that should take us to a few minutes after noon. And I do have notes here for what to follow up on. Obviously, the 2 items that we didn't get to, but we'll do that from there. So okay, so let me go ahead and open this up. It's a 1 minute. Since it is a public meeting, you can speak to agenda items beyond the ones that are listed here. I have 2 hands up, and we'll provide this opportunity from resource table, public comments, all that kind of stuff. We'll bear with us until we wrap here. So, okay, with that, it'll be 1 minute, and I see a hand from Andrew Lake. Mr. Lake. Are you there? Hello. Okay. Okay, well, let's move on to Mr. Gary Fortis.
You have 1 minute, sir.
Okay, Mr. Fortis, are you there? Okay, we'll try to come back to you afterwards. Let's jump over to Mr. Ellerton.
Can I have their 2 minutes? But let me make this really quick then. I just wanted to say that I did, after the last board meeting and Ernie's comments, I went ahead and tried as a student, and I enrolled in 3 colleges around our area. College of the Canyon, Santa Monica College, and I just picked Mission because it was up near College of the Canyons. I went through the process. I discovered that indeed everybody eventually ends up in CCC apply, and then you go through the process. It's the same landing page. Little bit of uneasiness comes in because the questions are a little different at each college. I would recommend that, at least for us, it'd be the minimum and they all be the same, because as a student, you feel like maybe you made a mistake on your last one, or did I miss something? It's unease. Not our control, that CCC apply, other than whatever the college is at. I actually went on Zoom, recorded my whole process. So if anybody ever wants to watch it, I went to College of the Canyons. Their website was just, it's 1 page, nice, pretty scrolling programs with 1 big button. Santa Monica, not as good. You had to scroll down to find the enroll. Mission was, of the 3, Missions was the least standout. There was just, but it's all there. You work, you click, you get to CCC apply. What comes out is an email at the end, one of which was College of the Canyons, real nice. Here's your number. You're going to get something from us within 72 hours. Here's a phone number. Here's a link. After the one from Mission that came out was 1 line that says, you get this email because you applied. Here's a survey. No information. Santa Monica sends a nice email. Then within 3 minutes at Santa Monica, I had an ID and they said, welcome, you're admitted. As a student, that felt really great. Now, I have no idea if that creates an issue greater down the road and what we're doing. But it was just, it felt good as a student. The following day, I did get the welcome email, you're admitted to COC, and I got a really nice email from Mission that said, welcome, you're admitted to Mission. My concern was that in between one that you get after you push the button that says apply, that one really concerned me because you're left, the one that I did do left me hanging, and I don't know what it is. I would suggest that everyone in this room go be a student and we should look at them all. That was all I wanted to get at. And it's the biggest thing is that I've had this, we had El Monte staff, everything. We went through an outreach and to go to dual enrollment, and we got 50 students from the high school, 20 of them finally gave up because they couldn't get through the enrollment process as a high school student. So we got to figure out something that we're getting them, we're outreaching, they're coming, we're just not answering the phone, not returning emails, and making it complicated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ellerton. Let me go back to the hand, Gary Fordice.
Good evening. I want to talk to you tonight from my heart on a subject of deep concern to every American. In recent months, members of my administration and officials of the committee.
Can we cut that off? I don't know what that is. I'm sorry. It feels like a crank call. Mr. Lake, are you back? We can unmute there. I wonder if these two, I don't recognize the numbers. We're going to move on because they're challenging.
Hello.
Yes, Mr. Lake.
No, that's a recording, trustee.
Okay, sorry, we're gonna stop that. We're getting cranked on the Zoom here. So let me go, Mr. Fong, you got a chance to join us. So can you make last comments here?
Thank you so much, President Bettis, and thank you so much, colleagues, for all the robust presentations here today. As we look at dual enrollment, different programs, enrollment presentations, and just the comments made by Mr. Ellington on the El Monte progress and how we can build out our partnerships. This is something that I think all the college presidents and the chancellor, thank you for all the presentations. But as we continue to focus on enrollment, as we continue to focus on right sizing and all the different opportunities, there's a lot of good work to be done. And so I really appreciate all the hard work that has been done. But as my colleagues have also mentioned, there's still a lot more work to be done going forward. So look forward to continue to working with each and every one of you on these efforts. And thank you so much again, President Bettis, for bringing us all here together today. Thank you.
Thank you, trustee. I will make a quick comment from having been a parent to a college student doing summer enrollment for LACCD. We didn't find the enrollment a problem. We actually found getting transferable classes that were right for CSUN being the problem. So I know if she didn't have a member of the board, we probably wouldn't have been able to navigate it well enough. But you know, there's a number of features, right, of reasons why people abandon, don't come here, don't use it, those kinds of things. But that's a continuing conversation. Trustee Hoffman, I know you had a hand up real quick. We're through that, but I opened it up real quick for Mike. Wanted to open it to you just in case, and then we'll get to a wrapping here.
Thank you. Just real quick, and thank you, Mr. Allerton, for enlightening us with the CCC apply process with other campuses. I do want to caution, if we're too loose with it, like we are at Glendale College, you get a lot of fake students filling up your classes, and then the students can't get in. And, you know, we just had a really terrible situation with a bunch of fake students in lots of classes, and then they block the real students from actually entering. And there are many reasons why we have fake students. A lot of that is so that they get the .edu email address at the end. And I think we've put some precautions in place in LACCD, which may be the reason why it takes a little bit longer and it's a tiny bit more complicated. Just want to put that out there. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, trustee. All right, last comments, the chancellor and then Noah, and then we'll call it.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vettis. I want to thank you all again for joining us this morning and giving us incredible comments that we will follow up on. We all take copious notes to extract the themes. Let me just underscore that all of us have a deep sense of urgency on this particular matter. You will see us concerted work, move, leverage ourselves as a district while recognizing that the individual colleges have some local responsibilities and opportunities that are in front of them. I think you hear and see the commitment from each of our institutions and those of us at the district office to ensure that everything works, that every click goes somewhere and whatnot. Clearly, this is both a technical and human process that lies ahead of us, and we'll continue to focus in on these areas. Thank you for foreshadowing the discussions on learning loss and our diversification of our faculty and staff for future study session. We will plan for that. I will go over the notes with you, Mr. President, and then we'll move forward. But again, excellent discussion this morning. More to follow. There is a sense of urgency as a matter, and I want to ensure the board that we've heard you loudly and clearly. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you. Noah.
Yes, thank you, President Beres, Chancellor Rodriguez, members of the board, certainly the campus presidents. I think this was an excellent conversation. I want to commend the board members. I think you're focusing on the right issues. It's not just enrollment, not just now, but in the future. And I do want to kind of echo what Trustee Hoffman said in terms of the data, but I would suggest that you look at the data that's yet to come. In other words, look at the demographic projections going forward and begin to make those adjustments now, because we know about the high school graduation rates. We know about the aging population. We know about the birth rates. All of those things will affect everything that you're seeking to do. So pay particular attention to that. And then the only other thing, Chancellor Rodriguez, happy to work with you based on this conversation. If there are things that we might want to add to the board's strategic priorities grid in terms of some nuance areas around some of the things that were discussed, you have my commitment to do that. But again, thank you, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to join you again. And as always, I learn a lot every time I spend time with boards, and I appreciate that.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Appreciate that, Noah. We have some follow-up to do, colleagues. I know there's a couple of moments in this meeting that we're on the verge of getting Zoom bombed. So these are the kinds of things that don't always happen in person. But those kind of dialogue and discussions are to be held in front of us, how we structure our meetings, and certainly the experience that students are having. But thank you, presidents, for all your presentations and your time. And we're going to be having some follow-up in the coming month on many of the issues that have been raised here. So colleagues, let me also put this on the table for all of you. If there are specific elements that you'd like to, that this sort of triggered in your head that you'd like us to focus on, if you can please shoot over a note to Chancellor or myself, and then as we structure the continuing part of this agenda, we'll go ahead and take care of and include those interests. So with that, colleagues, and if there's no objections, we'll stand adjourned at 12:10 p.m. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.